Marvel, I inherited the Shadow Realm. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 76. If you can't make it, come to me. The dark clouds are pressing down on the city, and the city is about to be destroyed. Under the cover of dark clouds and thunder, the entire New York City became extremely depressing. Countless citizens were panicked, looking at the sky in horror, thinking that the end of the world was about to come. At this moment, Thor and Loki turned their heads to look at Tony in the distance, and Tony was describing the narration with great emotion. Seeing that Thor and the others were staring at him, Tony couldn't help but stop and coughed lightly. I can't help it. You guys continue. Now you are the protagonists. Just pretend that I don't exist. After explaining, Tony closed his mouth, and Thor and Loki didn't bother to care. After all, as gods, both of them looked down on Tony, a mortal, even if this mortal behaved a little unusually. As long as all your incarnations are destroyed, I don't see where you can escape. Thor looked confident, and the Thor's hammer in his hand was instantly raised high. Or thunder penetrated the dark clouds and led the thunder down. Full. Instantly, countless dazzling thunderbolts fell from the sky, instantly turning the sky above New York City into a sea of thunderstorms. For a moment, the whole world was reflected in a vast expanse of white. However, all this was only a scene in Thor's eyes. At this moment, in Tony's eyes, Loki held up the scepter, and the gem inlaid on the top of the scepter was flashing white light. The thunderbolts falling from the sky were rushing to the top floor of the Times Square under the traction of Thor. There, a radioactive device more than 10 meters high was standing in place. Under the guidance of Thor, the power of thunderbolts was poured into the radioactive device to help charge it. Watching this scene, Tony's emotionless voice sounded again. The hero thought he had saved the world, but he didn't know that he was becoming an accomplice of the devil. His power was used by the devil to gradually push the world into hell. Hearing this, Loki, as the only listener, couldn't help but laugh. Soon, another Loki appeared beside Tony, looking at him curiously. You don't seem to be in a hurry? Why should I be in a hurry? I'm just here to watch the show. Tony stopped reciting the narration and asked back with a strange look on his face. I plan to gather an army to rule the earth. Do you know that? If you don't stop me, I will soon be able to open the time and space gate and gather an army to come. Loki told his plan and looked at Tony curiously, wanting to see Tony's reaction. Because Tony's performance made him curious, he directly revealed his plan. He was really a confident god. However, Tony's performance once again exceeded Loki's expectations. Who rules this world has anything to do with me. Also, if you think this world can be ruled so easily by you, then why doesn't the person behind you come in person? After the words fell, Loki's face changed. This was the first time his face changed. Since he came to the earth, he has always behaved very elegantly and calmly. But at this moment, listening to Tony's words, he suddenly couldn't keep calm. Do you know the person behind me? It's just a piece of purple sweet potato. PFFT. Loki, who had just become serious, couldn't help but laugh when he heard this. Purple sweet potato? Thinking about the image of that person, he suddenly felt that this description was very appropriate. You are really brave. You dare to comment on a supreme like this. But I'm very curious, what do you mean by what you said just now? Is this world very complicated? But since I came here, I don't seem to have found any strong people. Perhaps because of the comment just now, Loki's attitude at this moment no longer had that condescending meaning, but instead was like two old friends chatting. And Tony also found that this Loki seemed to be different from the one shown in the movie, and he didn't mind chatting with him. As far as I know, there is also a Supreme living on this planet, and there is another Supreme in the universe who was born on this planet. Tony didn't say it too clearly, but for a smart person like Loki, this information was enough. I see, so I have become cannon fodder. At this point, Loki smiled and shook his head. Tony raised his eyebrows strangely at his reaction. You're not angry? Why should I be angry? If I'm not strong enough, I have to obey the arrangements. Otherwise, I'm afraid I'll die before I even get to Earth. Loki said calmly. Hearing this, Tony really admired this guy at this moment. It's not because of this guy's temperament, but because of the truth he showed. Real arrogance, real regard for all living beings as ants, real acceptance of the fact that he is cannon fodder. Tony didn't see any reluctance in it. This also made Tony realize more deeply that this is a real world, not a movie or a comic. Everyone has flesh and blood, not a personality set by the screenwriter. The characters and plots of the previous life can only be used as references. Anyone who regards those things as the future destiny of this world will really become a shabby. What's more, the butterfly of fate can change the direction of a world by flicking its wings. Now Tony has changed all the plots beyond recognition, and those so-called plots have long lost their value. Retracting his thoughts, Loki's words also rang in Tony's ears at this moment. Since you won't stop me, I'll be busy now. I'll talk to you again when I have a chance. No problem, you go about your business. If you can't make it, you can come to me, and I'll take you in. As he spoke, Tony flicked out a business card and turned away. Looking at Tony's back as he left, Loki looked down at the business card in his hand and couldn't help but smile. Bang! A flame burned in his hand, and the business card turned directly into ashes. But an inexplicable wave instantly spread throughout New York, and everyone felt a wave of sonic vibration. Inside S.H.I.E.L.D., all the senior executives of S.H.I.E.L.D. were watching the projection of the time building in the conference room. In the picture, Thor controlled the thunder to continuously pour into the radiation device, and under the guidance of the radiation device, this force was directly integrated into the Rubik's Cube embedded in it, and successfully activated the cosmic Rubik's Cube. Suddenly, a vast space wave caused the surrounding space to vibrate, and a space-time gate hundreds of meters high was gradually emerging above the sky. Seeing this scene, Nick and the others' faces turned extremely ugly. Nick immediately said in a deep voice, "Did you see that portal? Can anyone tell me what that thing is used for?" After that, the S.H.I.E.L.D. scientist who had previously specialized in studying the cosmic cube stood up and said solemnly, "The cosmic cube contains vast power. It can open the door to space and transmit a large amount of weapons and resources over long distances. That door should be the door to space opened by the cosmic cube. When the portal is opened, some things may be transmitted, or they may be aliens." Chapter 77 How to Fight Between Truth and Falsehood. The S.H.I.E.L.D. scientist spoke in a serious tone, his face full of solemnity, and suddenly, the atmosphere in the conference room became depressing. After a long time, Nick finally stood up and looked at everyone and said, "Everyone, the time of life and death has come. Prepare for battle. No matter what ghost thing comes out of that door, we must beat them back. Jack, you contact the military and ask them to mobilize the army into the city and set up a defense line around it. Nothing can break through the blockade." "Yes, Director." "Wells, contact the government and ask them to organize all residents within 10 kilometers to evacuate. In addition, people outside 10 kilometers must also be prepared to evacuate at any time. In case of any unexpected situation, consider using weapons of mass destruction." As soon as these words came out, everyone present was stunned and looked at Nick in disbelief, as if they couldn't believe that these words came from his mouth. Wells, who was named by Nick, stood up immediately and said, "Director, this is a girl. Should we ask for instructions first?" "Don't worry, I will report to Congress later. You go and prepare now. Even if I'm held responsible later, I will bear the responsibility." "Let's do it." "Yes." Everyone agreed in unison. Since Nick had said this, they naturally couldn't refute it. After everyone left the meeting room, Nick stopped Steve and others. "Everyone, please go and bring Thor back now. In addition, you can try to destroy the device. If you can't destroy it, then withdraw first, and we will find a way." After speaking, Nick bowed to everyone and said solemnly, "This incident concerns the safety of about tens of millions of people and hundreds of millions of people in the United States. Please do your best, please." Everyone felt the determination from Nick, especially Eddie. He was a man full of justice, otherwise he would not have risked sneaking into the Life Foundation to uncover the truth about human experiments. At that moment, Eddie said loudly, "Don't worry, Director, leave it to us." Steve also stepped forward to help Nick up and said, "Don't forget, I'm a hero of the United States. Saving the world is what I'm best at." Steve rarely made a joke, and Nick also smiled. At that moment, everyone left one after another, and Nick began to contact his superiors. Under the leadership of S.H.I.E.L.D., various departments of the United States began to act quickly. Teams of soldiers and tanks drove into New York to build a blockade. With the Times building as the center, all residents within a radius of 10 kilometers began to evacuate under the organization of the US government. Naturally, there was some resistance in the middle, but they were all suppressed by S.H.I.E.L.D. At this critical moment, no matter who blocked the way, S.H.I.E.L.D. would not be polite. Loki stood on the roof of the Times building and watched this scene with an extremely calm look in his eyes. He did not stop at all, let alone intervene. As proud as he was, he disdained to take action against these mortals, as long as they did not stop him. At this time, Thor, who was immersed in fantasy, also woke up as his divine power was consumed. When he saw Loki standing intact not far away, and a huge space-time gate reflecting the sky, Thor's face suddenly changed. Especially when he sensed that the launch device was filled with familiar energy, his face became extremely ugly. What's going on? Thor asked in disbelief. He had realized something, but he was unwilling to admit it. Hearing this, Loki did not hide anything, and told him everything. It was not launched so quickly, but I still have to thank you, my dear brother. Your divine power has become the power to drive the magic cube, and the effect is better than I thought. Do you see that space-time gate? You helped me open it yourself. Hearing this, Thor's body shook slightly, and his face turned pale. It was not because he was scared, but because his divine power was severely consumed, making him weak. However, Loki's words also made him feel depressed. He actually became an accomplice? How could this be possible? He found it difficult to accept. He is the god of thunder, the god of war of the 9 realms, and now he has become Loki's accomplice, which is really unacceptable to him. But whether he accepts it or not, the matter has become a foregone conclusion. He can only watch, and can't change anything. At this time, Steve and his friends arrived. Whoosh! A sound of breaking through the air sounded, and Steve threw the shield in his hand out with force, smashing it towards Loki with a whistling sound. Bang! Loki's body was smashed directly, blood splattered, and his body fell to the ground. Seeing this, Banner and others who were about to take action were stunned. This is the enemy they regarded as a great enemy. Just like that, he was solved. Even Steve, the instigator, couldn't believe it. He looked at his hands and said, "When did I become so strong?" Just when everyone was surprised, Thor, who knew the truth, suddenly roared loudly, "That's fake, don't be fooled by him." As soon as he finished speaking, Loki's figure appeared beside Steve, and he swung the scepter in his hand hard and smashed it into his face. Steve's pupils shrank, and he quickly put his hands in front of him. But soon he found something wrong. There was no so-called attack, except a gust of wind. Fake, he said to himself, and another Loki appeared beside him, swinging his scepter at him again. He blocked it again, but it was still fake. In a short moment, Loki attacked 7 or 8 times, and each time it was fake. This made Steve completely relax his vigilance, and when he faced Loki's attack again, he was too lazy to move. As a result, bang, a dull sound rang out, and Steve's figure was smashed away by Loki's scepter. Seeing this scene, everyone except Thor was stunned. They couldn't understand what was going on. The weak Thor on the side saw this and explained helplessly, "Loki is the god of lies and deception, good at illusion, and can make illusions come true. All his actions may be true or false." Hearing this, everyone's eyes twitched, and some didn't know what to say. But they were stunned, but Loki didn't. Soon, a large number of Loki appeared around them and attacked them. Everyone dodged and tried to block, but they were all fake. Once they let down their guard, the attack became real, and everyone was tortured to death. Real or fake? How to fight this? Soon, everyone except Banner fell to the ground. Only Banner, who turned into a green fat man, relied on his strong defense to act as Loki's sandbag. Chapter 78, The future of Neo is in your hands. Seeing that the people of S.H.I.E.L.D. were about to collapse in the face of Loki, suddenly there was a fierce sound of gunfire. The many soldiers surrounding here opened fire one after another, and the bullets formed a rain curtain and poured towards Loki. Seeing this scene, Loki frowned, but still dodged quickly. Mortal weapons naturally could not cause harm to him, but he was proud and absolutely did not want mortal weapons to fall on him, so he chose to dodge. And his dodging immediately created an opportunity for Steve and others to retreat. Steve shouted, "Retreat. Take Thor, let's go." After saying that, he and Eddie came to Thor at the same time, picked him up and quickly fled after he had lost his strength. Banner and Flint did not stop and quickly began to retreat. Soon, the group was out of Loki's sight. Seeing this, Loki did not chase, but just looked at the direction, where everyone fled with a calm face, and I don't know what he was thinking. Inside S.H.I.E.L.D., watching the people retreat, Nick suddenly felt relieved. Although he was not present at the scene, he witnessed the entire battle between Steve and Loki through satellite. How should I put it? He was a little disappointed. The people he had high hopes for actually collapsed in front of Loki. Although Loki's ability was very strange, it was not an excuse. For a moment, he couldn't help but feel a little confused. Can they really stop Loki with their help? Before the battle, this question would have been a question mark in his mind, but now there was no question mark, only deep despair, because he couldn't see any hope of victory. As for the use of weapons of mass destruction, this was only a last resort. If possible, he didn't want to go this far. After all, this was New York. Once weapons of mass destruction were used, the impact would be too great. At that time, even the person in the White House would be affected. But besides this method, is there any other way? Nick kept thinking in his mind, and suddenly Tony's figure broke into his mind. If it's him, there should be hope. Nick thought uncertainly, but a glimmer of hope suddenly emerged in his originally desperate heart. Although he was reluctant to admit it, he knew that Tony was the most mysterious and powerful superhuman he had ever seen. Others might have no hope against Loki, but if he faced Loki, he would have a high probability of winning. This was not Nick's random guess, but the confidence he had built up after being abused by Tony for so long. But the question was, how to get Tony involved in this incident? In the name of justice? As soon as this thought came to his mind, Nick shook his head. He might be able to use the name of justice for others, but forget it for Tony. This guy is completely selfish. If there is not enough interest, it is simply a dream to ask him to take action. Seeing that the dawn he had just found was about to go out, suddenly, a person appeared in Nick's mind again. Natasha. He remembered that Natasha was sent to Stark undercover by the previous person, and he didn't know how she was doing now. With inexplicable expectations, Nick dialed Natasha's number. "Hello, Director?" Natasha was a little surprised, wondering why Nick suddenly called her. Although he has been undercover, she still knows what is going on in S.H.I.E.L.D. Ahem, how is your relationship with Tony? Nick asked awkwardly, feeling a little ashamed. Natasha was confused by this question. Relationship? What kind of relationship? Although she felt dizzy, she didn't forget Nick on the other end of the phone. She hesitated for a moment and said uncertainly, "It should be not bad." After that, Natasha couldn't help but think of restricted scenes in her mind, and a trace of shame appeared above her neck. Hearing this answer, Nick couldn't help but feel relieved. It's okay to have a relationship. I'm afraid there is no relationship. I have a task for you now. I want to ask Tony to help deal with someone. You find a way to make him agree. You can use any means. Nick said in a serious tone, but in fact, the embarrassment in his heart was almost uncontrollable. This was the first time he asked his subordinates to use this kind of thing to achieve a certain purpose. But as the saying goes, as long as you are not embarrassed, then others will be embarrassed. So, even if you feel very uncomfortable in your heart, you don't show it on the surface. Director, I can't guarantee that I can complete the task, Natasha said unconfidently. In fact, she couldn't be confident. Between her and Tony, Tony has always been the dominant one, and she was not sure how much weight she had in Tony's heart. It doesn't matter, do your best, and make him agree. The fate of the entire New York is in your hands now. After saying that, Nick hung up the phone without waiting for Natasha to reply. Sitting in the office chair and taking a deep breath for a long time, Nick forced himself to forget the previous call and get back to work. Stark Industries. Natasha listened to the busy tone coming from the phone, put the phone away, but a look of helplessness appeared on her face. She also wanted to try her best, but Tony didn't come to the company at all. How could she try her best? Helplessly thinking, Natasha couldn't help but take out the phone again, found Tony's number, hesitated for a moment, and dialed it directly. At Potts's residence, Tony, who was thinking about where to go, suddenly heard the phone ring. Picking up the phone and looking at the caller ID, Tony raised his eyebrows. "What's up? Tony, are you free tonight?" Hearing this, Tony's mouth suddenly curled up an inexplicable smile, and he suddenly missed her lips. "I'm free now. Wait for me to pick you up." I'm still at work." Natasha was caught off guard by Tony and said hurriedly, "It's okay. I'll give you a day off today. Come down now. I'll be there in a while." Tony said domineeringly, without giving her a chance to refuse, and hung up the phone directly. After packing up, Tony drove his sports car away from the community. 20 minutes later, Tony's car appeared near Stark Industries. Through the glass, Tony saw Natasha waiting at the door at a glance. She was wearing a professional suit, black stockings wrapped around her legs, and a pair of black glasses on her nose, making her look full of the temperament of a workplace elite. Squeak. With a sudden brakes sound, the car stopped in front of Natasha. Natasha opened the car door and got in. She said with a smile on her face, "Mr. Tony, where are you taking me? I'll treat you to dinner. How about sausages?" Tony started the car while smiling. Strangely, when he looked through the windshield, he could no longer see Natasha sitting in the passenger seat. Chapter 79. Playing landlord for a day. Time always passed by inadvertently. Tony played landlord with Natasha in the room for a whole day. It was not until night fell that Tony, who was refreshed, went downstairs in his pajamas. The seaside villa was still under renovation, so this was Tony's other villa. The happiness of rich people was so simple. Sitting on the balcony with a glass of wine, looking at the night view outside. At this moment, Natasha walked down from upstairs slowly. She exuded amazing charm after taking a bath, but it was a pity that Tony, who entered the sage time, completely ignored this style. "Tell me, what do you want from me?" Tony took a sip of the wine in the glass and said without turning his head. Although he didn't have much contact with Natasha, he didn't believe that she didn't ask for something today. However, seeing that she was so hardworking, Tony didn't mind giving her a chance. Natasha, who was originally thinking about how to start the conversation, was stunned for a moment when she heard this. Then she sat down next to Tony obediently, lying on him like a kitten and said, "I'm fine, but Nick wants to ask you for help." "Let me ask you something." Hearing this, Tony's mouth curled up slightly. "Locus matter?" "Yeah." "Then do you want my help?" "As long as you say yes, then I will help." Tony lowered his head and looked at Natasha with a smile. Suddenly, Natasha's heart skipped a beat, and she felt a little nervous. "Really?" "Yes, I keep my word," Tony promised. Natasha wanted to speak immediately, but before she spoke, she hesitated. There was a silence. After a long time, Natasha shook her head with a complicated expression. "I only help pass the message. I don't care about the rest." Hearing this, Tony's eyes flashed with surprise. "Oh, why?" After the words fell, Natasha immediately reached out and touched Tony's cheek and said, "You are very charming. I don't want to turn our relationship into a transaction. Help pass the message. I have completed my duties. The rest is not for me to consider." If it was just surprise just now, then Tony was really surprised now. In his opinion, Natasha should do whatever it takes to complete the task, which is in line with her identity. But what she said just now completely overturned his impression of her. Is she in love with him? Tony thought uncertainly. But I have to say that her choice has indeed won his favor. He is not short of women. If she just opened her mouth, then she will just be a good trading partner in the future. As for the rest, sorry, I will find out. He reached out and touched her long golden hair. I don't know what shampoo she used. Her hair was particularly soft and comfortable to touch. "You're smart. Call Nick." "Okay." Natasha nodded obediently and got up to get her cell phone. Soon, the call was connected with a beep. Nick's slightly anxious voice came from the phone. "Natasha, how is it? Did he agree?" "This is Tony," Tony said with the phone. Suddenly, Nick on the other end of the phone was silent. When he spoke again, his voice had become calm and unhurried, without any sense of urgency just now. After dealing with Tony for a long time, Nick knew very well that he must not let Tony figure out his thoughts, otherwise, he would be bleeding. This was the experience he gained from bloody lessons again and again. But Tony didn't have time to bargain with him today and said directly, "You want me to help you deal with Loki? Okay, just agree to one condition of mine." "What condition?" "Natasha will quit S.H.I.E.L.D. in the future." Hearing this, Nick frowned immediately. "I won't use my subordinates to make deals." "Really? Then why did you ask her to find me before?" Tony sneered disdainfully. What he hated most was people who were whores and wanted to pretend to be virtuous. Nick was no different from those people now. On the other end of the phone, Nick was also speechless by Tony's retort and didn't know what to say for a while. "Okay, stop talking nonsense. It's rare that I'm in a good mood. This is the condition. If you agree, we'll make a deal. If you don't agree, get out," Tony said impatiently. Suddenly, Nick's dull voice sounded, "I respect Natasha's choice. That's it. Hang up." After saying that, Tony hung up the phone without hesitation and then looked down at Natasha. "Just help me run the company obediently in the future. Remember to get along well with Potts." "Yeah." Natasha nodded. At SHIELD, Nick sat in his office chair and rubbed his brows with a headache. He didn't expect things to turn out like this. Although he successfully invited Tony, he lost a capable subordinate forever. Natasha's strength may not be strong, but her ability is undoubtedly outstanding. For a moment, he didn't know whether what he did was right or wrong. Shaking his head and not thinking about it anymore, Nick got up and left the office and walked towards the conference room. In the conference room, Steve and others were sitting in the conference room with decadent faces. In addition to them, there was also a white old man. He was the scientist who was responsible for studying the cosmic cube before. Because of his understanding of the cosmic cube, he was also approved to attend this meeting. Soon, the door of the conference room opened, and Nick walked in. Looking at the listless people, he knocked on the table and said, "Hey, guys, the problems we have to face have not been solved yet, so cheer up. James, report on the situation of the space-time gate." After reminding everyone, Nick looked directly at the white old man. Hearing this, James stood up and said, "Director, according to our calculations, the huge space-time gate will open at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning at the latest. We don't have much time now. Is there any way to close it before it opens?" Nick frowned. James shook his head helplessly. "There is a way, but it is basically impossible to achieve. According to our research, we can use powerful energy to impact the space-time gate. As long as the power of the space-time gate cannot withstand the impact, the space-time gate can be forcibly closed. But the energy contained in the cosmic cube is too vast, and there is simply not enough energy to impact it. Anything else? Tell me something useful," Nick said impatiently. He needed a solution, not an unfeasible solution. The last solution is to move the cosmic cube. As long as the cosmic cube is taken down from the launch device, the space-time gate can also be closed. However, this may cause energy imbalance and cause a big explosion. After all, the launch device is also full of energy. Hearing this, everyone couldn't help but look at Thor. After all, the energy in the launch device was infused by him. Chapter 80. The gate of time and space has been opened. Seeing that everyone was looking at him, Thor's face could not help but darken, but he could not speak, so he could only pretend not to see it. How much he looked down on everyone before, how embarrassed he was now. He confidently went to solve Loki, but not only did he not solve it, but he also helped Loki. Where can he go to complain? Fortunately, Nick came to the rescue at this time and said, "If there is a way, you will be responsible for getting the Rubik's Cube, and I will find someone to deal with Loki." As soon as this was said, Steve and others looked up at Nick, their eyes full of confusion. "Do you have a backup plan?" Thor asked the doubts in everyone's hearts directly. Nick nodded. "I contacted Tony. He will take action." As soon as this was said, the faces of Steve, Banner, Flint and others changed one after another. Thor keenly realized that the atmosphere was wrong. He wanted to ask who Tony was, but he shut up. "Director, how can you find that guy? He is not reliable at all." Steve stood up and expressed his dissatisfaction. Although Banner did not speak, he looked at Nick with the same eyes. Nick had expected this, but he had to say it, otherwise, when Tony showed up, he was afraid that they would fight before Loki was taken down. Captain, calm down, I can't do anything. Tony is the only one who can deal with Loki now. If we don't find him, what else can we do? Hearing this, although Steve agreed with Nick's words, he still said unwillingly, that guy's strength is indeed unfathomable, but how do you know that he is sincerely cooperating with us and not playing tricks on us? Once he turns against us temporarily, it will be a real disaster. Besides, we just don't understand Loki's ability, so we suffered a great loss. Let us try again. Even if we can't take down Loki, we will definitely not be as embarrassed as today. After speaking, Nick spread his hands helplessly. Captain, do you know what it means if you try? About tens of millions of people may suffer a catastrophe because of your attempt. And if you fail, I can only use the last plan and use weapons of mass destruction in New York. By that time, regardless of the economy and the impact, do you know how many people will die? The two argued in the conference room, and the atmosphere became very depressing. As Nick continued to talk, Steve, who was originally righteous, could not help but remain silent. In short, this is the plan. Tomorrow you will be responsible for destroying the device and taking away the cosmic cube, and Loki will be handed over to Tony. Don't worry, although Tony is selfish, his credibility is still guaranteed. Since he agreed to help, he will not turn against us. That's it, let's adjourn the meeting. After saying that, Nick stood up and wanted to leave. But at this time Eddie asked weakly, Director, since you have a plan, why don't you act now? Hearing this, Nick paused, left a sentence to act tomorrow morning, and hurried away, without directly answering Eddie's question. If Tony could listen to him, he would also like to act now, and solve this matter, as soon as possible. But Tony didn't listen. Without Tony's cooperation, they couldn't act, so they had to wait until tomorrow morning. Time passed, and the night passed quickly. This night was destined to be unforgettable. The huge time-space gate hung in the sky, and the citizens of New York City could see it, as long as they looked up. Countless people talked about it, and even stayed up all night. The scene above New York City had already spread all over the internet, rushing to the top of the topic list. In this way, the time came to 7 o'clock in the morning. All residents around the Times building were evacuated, and the military built a strict blockade. Nick, Steve and others had arrived here early, waiting for the action to begin. As time passed, Tony's figure was not seen, and Steve and others became anxious. What's going on? Why hasn't that guy come yet? Director, do we have to wait? Wait, Nick said calmly. Compared with the anxiety of everyone, at this moment, he showed the demeanor of a general, without the slightest panic. It's not that he is really not anxious, but he has done what he can. It's useless to be anxious, so it's better to calm down. Finally, when the time came to 7:50, Steve could no longer sit still, and turned to look at Nick. That guy must be playing tricks on us. He won't come at all. Let me take the guys up. While the space-time gate hasn't opened yet, let me take the guys up and try my luck. Steve asked for a fight. Nick frowned, but his tone was still firm. Keep waiting. After the words fell, many people's mentality almost exploded. But looking at Nick's cold expression, everyone forced themselves to suppress the irritation in their hearts. Although they often quarreled with Nick, Nick's majesty as the director has always been firmly controlled. Once he turned cold, Steve and others did not dare to get angry. Finally, it was 8 o'clock, and a huge roar suddenly came from the sky. Buzz. The sound waves spread in all directions, and the huge space-time gate began to ripple like water waves. The space-time gate was completely stable, and could be opened. Looking at this scene, everyone didn't care about being depressed. They stared at the space-time gate in a serious state, wanting to see what would come out from behind the door. Finally, a burst of light penetrated the heaven and earth, and the space-time gate was completely opened, and a black starry sky appeared at the other end of the space-time gate. When everyone saw the scene behind the space-time gate through the space-time gate, everyone couldn't help but take a breath. In the vast starry sky, countless spaceships were connected together, occupying the vast starry sky. On the ship, soldiers, wearing equipment completely different from the Earth's army, began to cross the space-time gate and descend on the Earth. Looking at them, everyone's face became solemn. Their guess came true. There was really an army behind the space-time gate. An alien army. Taking a deep breath, Nick forced himself to suppress the shock in his heart and was about to give an order. At this moment, a sound of a sports car came from behind everyone. Nick and others subconsciously looked back and saw a silver-white supercar drifting and stopping steadily behind everyone. Then, Tony, wearing sunglasses, put his hands in his trouser pockets and walked over unhurriedly. Seeing this scene, Nick was relieved, while Steve exploded on the spot and rushed towards Tony with an angry face. "Arsehole!" Bang! With a loud bang, Steve flew back at a faster speed, but he was slapped back by Tony. Seeing this, everyone was stunned, especially Banner. Originally, he also wanted to explode, but now he just wanted to find a place to hide so that Tony wouldn't see him. Chapter 81. The army arrives, and the fighting continues. Tony slapped Steve away and continued to walk towards the crowd with a calm face as if nothing had happened. "Yo, you're all here. Why are you all looking at me? Although I know I'm handsome, I'm not interested in men." Tony spoke lazily and casually, and his eyes swept over everyone, finally stopping at Nick. The two looked at each other, and no one spoke. Tony walked past him and cast his eyes above the time building. Looking at the spaceships in the vast starry sky through the time and space gate, Tony raised his eyebrows and looked curious. Aliens, whether in his previous life or this life, it was the first time he had seen them, and they seemed to be no different from humans. Of course, Loki and Thor didn't count, as he had seen them before. As he was thinking about all sorts of things, a black shadow emerged under his feet, and a night bat ninja appeared on Tony's way forward, letting Tony step on his back, and then carrying Tony up into the sky. The whole process can be described in 2 words: smooth. Everything seemed to have been rehearsed, very smooth, giving people a sense of style. Everyone watched Tony soar into the sky, and Nick finally said, "Okay, it's time for us to act. Everyone, the life and death of New York City is in your hands. Whether we can succeed this time depends on you." Nick said solemnly, and everyone's faces became serious and nodded solemnly. Even Steve, who was slapped away by Tony just now, didn't care about what happened just now. Compared with the lives of tens of millions of people in New York, being slapped away by Tony was just a small matter. As a hero of the United States, Steve still knew the importance of this. At this moment, everyone also took action and moved towards the Times building. At this time, under the time-space gate, as alien soldiers descended one by one, they quickly organized a team and launched an attack on the surrounding American soldiers. Steve and others who were heading to the Times building also ran into these alien soldiers, and the two sides collided immediately. Boom. 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 Bursts of artillery roars, mixed with violent explosions, resounded throughout New York. In order to stop the alien soldiers, the American soldiers, who were armed to the teeth, did not care about the consumption of ammunition in their hands. Everyone poured out ammunition frantically, as if they wanted to completely blow up the Times building to the ground. Similarly, the alien soldiers who descended were not to be outdone in the face of this scene. The laser guns kept shooting and pierced the American soldiers. The two sides fought for only a few minutes, and a large number of American soldiers were broken into pieces under the sharp edge of the laser guns. In contrast, the thermal weapons that humans have always been proud of cannot break through the defensive uniforms on the alien soldiers. The two sides are like the collision between modern civilization and ancient civilization. The crushing of technology has completely put the American soldiers at a disadvantage. Fortunately, the American side has superheroes who can share the pressure and prevent the American soldiers from being directly defeated. Flint controlled the yellow sand to run rampant among the crowd. Although he was immune to most physical damage, he could not completely isolate the damage caused by the laser, but the damage was far slower than recovery. So he rushed into the alien soldiers and turned into a killing god, ignoring the attacks of the alien soldiers, and controlled the yellow sand to penetrate their bodies through the gaps in the defense devices. Banner was even more direct. His strong defense gave him the courage to run rampant on the battlefield. He almost ignored all attacks, like a human tank, rampaging in the crowd. A large number of alien soldiers were smashed into meat patties under his huge power. The defensive devices on them were as fragile as paper to banner, and they could not defend against his attacks at all. Steve, the earliest American hero, also showed strength that was not inferior to that of humans. Holding a shield, he threw it out directly, like a boomerang, constantly shuttling through the crowd. Wherever the shield passed, a large number of alien soldiers were directly beheaded, and the scene was bloody and violent. In addition, because he had previously accommodated the symbiote, his physical fitness far exceeded the original work. Although he could not run rampant like Banner, as long as he was careful, he was still enough to sweep the battlefield. However, the most dazzling performance was Thor. As a god, Thor has his own pride, not to mention that he is the so-called god of war of the 9 realms. But because of his arrogance, the time-space gate opened, and the alien army descended, so he had been holding back a rage in his heart, with nowhere to vent. So now that he had just entered the battle, he acted extremely crazy, swinging Thor's hammer in his hand continuously, and lightning struck down one after another, and each time an alien soldier would be reduced to ashes. Even so, he still disliked the slow speed, so he simply activated his ultimate move, Thunderbolt, and directly summoned a sea of thunder, killing countless people. Nick, who was standing in the back watching the battle, nodded with satisfaction at the performance of everyone on the battlefield. His previous strategy was still correct. Try to gather enough power. Although it may not play a decisive role, it can also influence the direction of the local war. Thinking of this, Nick couldn't help but look up at the sky. Compared with the people in SHIELD, Tony was the real top priority. If he could stop Loki, everyone would be happy, but if he couldn't stop him, things would be bad. He was enough to wipe out Steve and others alone. With the help of a large army, wouldn't he be even more rampant? Therefore, although he could not see the scene in the sky, Nick still stared at the sky closely, expecting Tony to continue to be invincible. And just when he was full of expectations for Tony, he didn't know that Tony did not fight with Loki at this moment. The two stood on the top floor of the Times building like old friends, looking down at the battle below. How are these soldiers? Are they excellent? If there were no strong people to take action, I might really have a chance to rule this planet, Loki said in a calm tone. Tony shook his head. There is no if in this world. You should know that in front of the real strong, the number of people is not very effective. I know, but I still feel a little unwilling. That big sweet potato used me as a chess piece to test, and that hidden supreme used them as chess pieces to test. Can the weak really not control their own destiny? Ever since he learned that there was a supreme hidden on the earth, Loki knew that his idea of ruling the earth would not succeed. Therefore, he was no longer concerned about the arrival of the alien army this time. Otherwise, he wouldn't have just sat there and watched the army fight to the death, while he was here telling Tony about his unwillingness. Listening to his words, Tony spread his hands and said nothing. But he didn't show any depressed mood, but instead looked completely unconcerned, which made Loki feel a little confused. Don't you have any unwillingness at all? If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 82, The Soul Left the Body and Found You. Found you. Loki and Tony didn't have much contact, but he found that Tony didn't seem to have any emotions like the unwillingness of a weakling. He was very indifferent to everything, and even dared to openly tease a Supreme. If he was a weakling, it would be fine. Loki could use the excuse of ignorance and fearlessness. But from Tony's performance, although Loki didn't know how strong he was definitely not weak. In addition, he also knew that there were strong people at the level of the Supreme, so it was even more impossible that he was fearless because of ignorance. So the question is, what is his confidence that makes him have the confidence to tease the Supreme? Loki was busy building the space-time gate before, and he didn't have time to think about it. Now that he thinks about it carefully, Tony is suddenly shrouded in a mist in his eyes. With a smile on his lips, Tony looked at Loki, who was curious, and shook his head slowly, saying, "The Supreme also started as a weakling, so why should you be unwilling? Maybe I can't match the Supreme now, but in the future, I will reach that level sooner or later, so there is nothing to be unwilling about." Hearing this, Loki's mouth twitched, and he suspected that Tony was fooling him, but he had no evidence. What he said seemed to make sense, but it was actually all nonsense. If you can really reach the Supreme through hard work, then the Supreme would be worthless. For example, he himself, among the gods in the god realm, has the best talent, but he still has no confidence to set foot on the Supreme. But from Tony's tone, setting foot on the Supreme is as simple as eating and drinking water, and there is no difficulty at all. Although I don't know where you get the confidence from, I would like to see it. Shaking his head, Loki issued a battle invitation. Since he couldn't figure out where Tony got the confidence to say such a thing, then let's have a fight. He wanted to see if this confident guy has the strength to match this confidence. Hearing this, Tony turned his head and looked at him with a hint of curiosity in his eyes. He was also very curious about Loki's illusion, so he nodded without shirking his responsibility. "Okay, I also want to know how strong I am." After accepting the invitation, the atmosphere between the two of them changed immediately. If the two of them were just chatting, like old friends before, now they were like mortal enemies, exuding an astonishing murderous intent. For the two of them, sparring was out of the question, and if they wanted to fight, they would fight for real. If anyone was killed by accident, it would be their fault. As the saying goes, dragons don't live with snakes. If they don't have matching strength, neither Tony nor Loki would even look at each other. Bang! Tony took the lead, and two lasers gushed out of his eyes and shot towards Loki. As expected, the lasers penetrated Loki's body, landed on the wall behind him, and blew up the wall. Seeing this, Tony immediately raised his eyebrows. Although he already knew Loki's ability, he was still a little surprised when he tried it himself. He was sure that Loki was standing in front of him, but he suddenly became an illusion. It was amazing. At this time, another Loki appeared directly on Tony and punched Tony in the face. A strong sound of breaking through the air made people feel that the punch was real. But Tony did not dodge because he knew very well that the authenticity of the punch was not important at all. Everything depended on Loki's thoughts. If he dodged the punch, then the punch was fake. If he could not dodge, then the punch was real. Therefore, it was meaningless to guess whether Loki's attack was real or fake. Boom. A powerful punch landed directly on Tony's face. Looking at this scene, Loki's eyes flashed with disappointment. If Tony only had this strength, he might really have to kill this friend who was quite to his liking today. But soon he found something wrong. Tony's body did not change at all, and even his head did not tilt. More importantly, he did not feel the touch that should be there when the body collided. At this moment, Tony turned his head to look at Loki. Loki's fist was still in front of him, but if you look closely, you can find that Loki's fist is still 1 millimeter away from his cheek. Loki hit a wall of air, not Tony. Realizing this, Loki smiled. What kind of ability is this? It's a bit like spiritual power. Yes, it's the telekinesis evolved from spiritual power. Tony explained with a smile, and did not stop attacking. A telekinesis of invisible matter directly enveloped Loki, and trapped him in place. He could feel that he had indeed trapped Loki's entity, that is, this was his real body. At this moment, the laser in Tony's eyes reappeared and bombarded Loki's vitals directly. With the power of the pig spell, once this blow was implemented, Loki would be seriously injured, even if he didn't die. But Tony didn't mean to be soft at all. But unexpectedly, the laser missed again, and Loki was still standing in front of him. Tony was able to confirm through telekinesis that the Loki in front of him was his real body, not an illusion. Tony frowned immediately. What's going on? I have to say, you really exceeded my expectations. You can actually lock onto my real body. But, just because you locked onto my real body, it doesn't mean that what you saw is really me. Or, you are not attacking me now. Loki tilted his head and smiled. Tony instantly understood what he meant. His perception was not wrong, but what he sensed was completely different from what he saw, or his perception was blurred by Loki. For example, He sensed that it was in front of him, but in fact Loki was behind him. After figuring this out, Tony couldn't help but marvel in his heart. Loki really played a trick on him. He believed that, if Loki hadn't been trapped by his telekinesis, he would have been attacked by a storm. Slowly exhaling the foul air from his mouth, Tony suppressed the shock in his heart. A confident smile appeared on his face again. You have indeed reached the pinnacle of illusion, but you must have forgotten one thing. Not everything in this world can be turned into reality. What? Loki frowned, and suddenly a bad premonition arose in his heart. Tony did not explain, but just smiled and closed his eyes. The next second, a transparent Tony suddenly emerged from his body, and it was his soul body. Sheep spell, soul out of the body. Compared with the perception of the flesh, the perception of the soul is more acute. Moreover, life is a miracle in the universe. Even if Loki's illusion has reached the pinnacle, it is impossible to simulate a real soul. Sure enough, after breaking free from the constraints of the flesh, Tony easily found the location of Loki's real body. A smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, and Tony looked at Loki, who was standing not far from him and unable to move. Found you. Chapter 83, The Second Invitation to Loki. The soul returned to the body, and the laser in Tony's eyes burst out again, piercing through a wall. In the direction of the wall, it was exactly where Loki was. Looking at the bursting laser, Loki's face changed, and his ability to turn the false into the real was activated again, but this time it was no longer to create illusions, but to turn the real into the real. A series of defensive light screens blocked in front of him. In a short moment, Loki constructed more than a dozen defensive light screens, but he underestimated the power of the pig spell. It was an energy laser that was condensed to the extreme, and ordinary defense could not stop it at all. It only weakened the power of the two energy lasers. The next moment, the two lasers fell directly on his chest and blasted him out. Boom. With an explosion, Tony's perception finally returned to normal. Loki lay in a mess in a ruin. On his chest, a big hole the size of a watermelon appeared on him. Tony could even see his intestines through the big hole in his chest. As for his internal organs, they had already melted with the laser just now. But gods are gods, and their life levels are completely different from those of mortals. An injury that would kill an ordinary person thousands of times is just a serious injury to Loki, and it is hard to say whether it is fatal or not. Ahem. A violent cough sounded, and Loki struggled to stand up from the ground. At the same time, the big hole in his chest also recovered rapidly at a speed visible to the naked eye. Seeing this, Tony's eyebrows twitched slightly, and a trace of surprise flashed across his face. Awesome. You are indeed stronger than I thought. Loki praised. Although his appearance was a little embarrassed, he still maintained the elegance of a god. But I'm the god of fire. Fraud and lies are just one of the things I'm good at. My real power is flames. As he said that, Loki raised his hand, and a burst of flames suddenly appeared in the palm of his hand. The temperature around him suddenly began to rise rapidly, and a flame symbol appeared on his forehead. It instantly filled his whole person with majesty and a domineering temperament that was completely absent before. However, Tony's shocked expression did not appear as Loki imagined, but his face was full of strangeness. The next second, Tony also raised his hand, and a burst of flames also emerged in his hand, and a dragon shape suddenly appeared between Tony's eyebrows. The same posture, the same flame, except for the different patterns between the eyebrows. The two people were like looking in the mirror. Suddenly, Loki was not calm. How is it possible? A scream came out of his mouth, and Loki stared at the flame in Tony's hand with a shocked face. Ordinary people may only see the flame, such an appearance, but he is the god of fire. He can see more things that ordinary people cannot see. For example, the rules of fire. The flame in Tony's hand is completely transformed by the rules of fire, and he is more like a god of fire than him. If he comprehends the rules and then controls the flame, then Tony controls the rules and makes the flame obey his control. There is a qualitative difference between the two. You are just a mortal. How can you control the rules? This is impossible, Loki said in despair, and at this moment he suddenly lost his usual calmness. Tony looked at his state and spread his hands helplessly, not knowing how to comfort him. After all, he was different from others. As a cheating player, anything he said now would be suspected of being pretentious. so it was better not to say anything. Seeing his appearance, he couldn't calm down for a while, so Tony ignored him and turned to look downstairs. The people of S.H.I.E.L.D. were still struggling among the alien soldiers. Tony also knew their purpose, which was to dismantle the cosmic cube on the radiation device. Nick had told him all the plans last night. At this moment, not far from him, the radiation device and the cosmic cube were there, and he could solve the problem by just reaching out. But he didn't want to move. He had completed the transaction and delayed Loki. The rest of the matter was not his business. Even if it could be solved by just moving his hands, he had no intention of intervening. In this way, the people of S.H.I.E.L.D. fought hard below, and Tony watched with relish on the rooftop. At this moment, he suddenly felt a little annoyed that he had not prepared some snacks. He had never watched the Avengers in his previous life. Now he finally got to watch the live version, but there were no snacks. A popcorn movie without popcorn always feels like something is missing. Thoughts in my mind were floating around randomly, and time passed by little by little. Finally, Steve and others killed their way through the army and entered the Times building, rushing to the top floor. In order to solve this matter as soon as possible, they exerted their own speed to the extreme. However, the closer they got to the top floor, the more uneasy they felt. In their opinion, Tony and Loki should have fought very fiercely. But now, they didn't hear any movement. Could it be that Tony failed? Thinking of this, everyone frowned and their eyes became more and more solemn. As for Tony taking down Loki, none of them had thought of it. After all, after seeing Loki's ability to turn illusions into reality, they didn't think Tony could crack such a strange ability. In this way, the people who were speculating and uneasy in their hearts came all the way to the top floor of the Times building and opened the door. Suddenly, the figures of Tony and Loki came into everyone's eyes at the same time, and everyone was stunned. They saw that the two were looking in their direction with a calm face, and the atmosphere was very harmonious, without any tension. For a moment, everyone's heart skipped a beat. Steve frowned and stepped forward and said, "You really betrayed humanity." He had always been prejudiced against Tony, and when he saw the two of them getting along so harmoniously, he immediately thought that Tony had joined Loki. Tony was too lazy to pay attention to such a prejudiced person, so he ignored him and just yawned and said, "You are too slow. The cosmic cube and the radiation device are right there. You can solve them by yourselves. I'm leaving first. What are you going to do? Do you want to come with me?" Tony turned his head and looked at Loki on the side and invited him for the second time. Compared with the last silent refusal, this time, Loki thought about it and nodded immediately, saying, "Okay, it just so happens that I have a new understanding of fire. Maybe you can give me more inspiration." After that, the two of them walked towards the stairs one after the other. Looking at the two people coming towards them, Steve and others were stunned for a moment, then looked at the two people with vigilance and made way for them. "Loki." Thor in the crowd suddenly spoke. Loki stopped and turned to look at him, with a trace of doubt on his face. Seeing this, Thor didn't know what to say for a moment, so he could only take a deep breath and said, "I will definitely take you back to the god's realm. Whatever, see you later." With a smile, Loki followed Tony's steps and left the time building. Chapter 84, Jarvis and Loki. Loki followed Tony. Steve and the others looked at the radiation device and the cosmic cube not far away and suddenly felt like clowns. They tried their best, fought to the death, and claimed to represent justice. But in the end, Loki didn't care what they did at all. This made everyone feel weird, and even the sense of justice to save the world was weakened a lot. And Tony, what happened between him and Loki? Why did Loki leave with him? Everyone was full of doubts. Fortunately, Steve did not forget their mission on this trip and quickly stepped forward to dismantle the cosmic cube. Although Loki left, the alien army was still coming in an endless stream. Everyone even saw a spaceship coming out of the time-space gate. If it really came, it would be unknown how many people would die. Boom. A terrifying energy wave swept in all directions with the Times building as the center. The cosmic cube was forcibly taken down, and the time-space gate hanging in the sky flashed for a moment and then closed. The energy contained in the radioactive device was directly unbalanced because of the removal of the cosmic cube, resulting in a huge explosion. Fortunately, the explosion was not very powerful and only destroyed a few buildings. Is it over? Nick looked at the smoke and dust, somewhat uncertain. The fierce gunfire had stopped at this moment, and the time-space gate that brought great pressure to people also disappeared completely. At this time, the figures of Steve and others walked out of the smoke and dust. Seeing this, Nick's eyes flashed with a hint of joy. Is it solved? Although he already knew the answer, he still wanted to get confirmation from everyone. Steve nodded and stretched out his right hand at the same time, and the cosmic cube fell quietly into his hand. Suddenly, Nick breathed a sigh of relief, and his originally tense mind was completely relaxed. But, well done. As he said, Nick was about to reach out to take the cosmic cube, but at this moment, Steve instantly retracted his hand. Suddenly, Nick frowned and looked at Steve in confusion. Director, I want to know how you plan to deal with the cosmic cube, Steve said in a low voice. Nick thought he was still angry about Tony, so he tried to persuade him. Captain, I know you don't like Tony, but if we don't give him the cosmic cube, we can't afford the consequences. For the sake of the overall situation, Nick was really worried. Then did you know that Loki left with Tony? What? Nick was stunned and had no idea about this news. Steve continued, I don't know how the two of them got together, but if you give the cosmic cube to Tony, it means giving it to Loki again. Then what are we fighting for? At this point, Steve stared at Nick, and Nick, who had been determined before, was now full of uncertainty. It shouldn't be. Tony is Tony, and Loki is Loki. Director, do you want to take a gamble? Steve said with a self-deprecating smile. Nick was silent. He couldn't gamble with the safety of the entire United States. He believed that Tony would not do anything with the cosmic cube, but if he gave the cosmic cube to Loki again, who could guarantee that what happened today would not happen again? Thinking of this, Nick looked at the cosmic cube in Steve's hand with a headache. This thing has now become a hot potato. It's not right to give it to him, and it's not right not to give it to him. Forget it. Let's talk about this later. Let's finish the current things first. Please help save people. Unable to think of a solution, Nick simply gave up the choice and solved the current problem first. Although the surrounding residents have been evacuated, the explosion just now still affected many soldiers. Although there will be special rescuers, it is not as fast as many extraordinary people. Hearing this, everyone nodded and scattered to rescue. As for the matter of the cosmic cube, it was subconsciously ignored by everyone at this moment, and Steve kept it temporarily. On the other side, Loki followed Tony back to the beach villa in Liberty City. Under the power of money, in just a few days, the destroyed villa has been completely restored to its original state. Jarvis, long time no see, how are you recently? Tony greeted him as soon as he entered the door. Suddenly, Jarvis' voice rang in the hall. Sir, long time no see, I'm fine. Let me introduce you, Loki. Tony introduced Loki without turning his head. Hello, Mr. Loki, welcome to Mr. Tony's villa. Jarvis greeted Loki. Hello. After responding, Loki looked around the villa in surprise and asked curiously, what was that person who just spoke? Why didn't I feel the breath of life? Artificial intelligence, a product of technology, red wine or coffee? While answering, Tony opened the refrigerator. Although he hadn't been here for a few days, the supplies in the villa were replenished every day. Red wine bar. After responding, Loki sat on the sofa with a hint of amazement on his face. Silicon-based life form? It feels almost the same as real life. Thank you for the compliment, Mr. Loki. I still have a lot to learn. Jarvis continued. Immediately, Loki and Jarvis started chatting. One of them is artificial intelligence and the other is a god, and their knowledge is very vast. During the chat, Tony actually felt a hint of mutual appreciation from the tone of the two guys. Tony couldn't help but raise his eyebrows, and some strange thoughts flashed through his mind. Placing the red wine in front of Loki, Tony took a sip. Are you interested in artificial intelligence? Hearing this, Loki was stunned, then smiled and shook his head. No, I have seen many silicon-based life in the universe, but none of them have the thinking ability of Jarvis. Their thinking ability is very strong, but compared to Jarvis, they are more like set programs. They don't have the learning and growth ability of Jarvis, so I'm a little curious. Hearing this, Tony smiled and tried to say, since you have nothing to do recently, do you need me to arrange a research room for you to study artificial intelligence and find something for you to do? When the time comes, I'll let Jarvis cooperate with you. Hearing this proposal, Loki couldn't help but lower his head and think for a while, but soon made a decision and said, that's fine, I do have some interest in this area. After that, the two clinked the red wine in their glasses. Although Loki had never been exposed to technology, neither he nor Tony thought he was not good enough. Gods are beings that transcend ordinary life. Although Tony thinks the gods in this world are a little weak, it is undeniable that gods have strong learning abilities. Even if it is a field that has never been touched before, as long as you are willing to study it, you will definitely make some achievements. After all, the Mind Stone is in this guy's hands, and who knows what he and Jarvis can do with it. Chapter 85. Reed is seriously injured after returning from space. SHIELD. Conference room. The cosmic cube was placed in the center of the conference table. Nick and the others stared at the cosmic cube on the table. No one spoke, and the atmosphere was a bit depressing. Before, everyone avoided making a choice, but what was coming had to come. After dealing with all the things, they had to face a question, whether to hand over the cosmic cube or not. Handing it over might cause today's tragedy to repeat itself. Not handing it over would require considering who could bear it if Tony retaliated. It can be said that except for Thor, everyone else present had dealt with Tony before. Even Steve, who was most unhappy with Tony, had to admit that once Tony retaliated, the disaster would be higher than Loki's. So, this was a dilemma. Finally, Thor couldn't stand the depressing atmosphere and stood up impatiently and said, what's there to be entangled about? If not, let me deal with that guy named Tony. Kill him, and everything will be fine. After he finished speaking, everyone looked at him strangely, and Nick's mouth twitched, inexplicably feeling that the scene in front of him was a bit familiar. Thor seemed to have said before that he would deal with Loki, but what happened? Not only did he not solve the problem, but he made it worse. For a moment, no one spoke, just looking at Thor quietly. Finally, Thor could not bear the pressure and sat down unwillingly. This won't work, that won't work, so what do you think we should do? Keep wasting time here? Thor's unhappy voice sounded, with some helplessness in his tone. He, the dignified god of war of the Nine Realms, was actually helpless against Immortal. Before fighting Loki, he didn't even dare to think about it. But now he had to admit that the mortal who could make Loki bow his head was really not someone he could deal with. Thor's words broke the silence in the conference room. Nick, who was sitting at the main seat, took a deep breath and took the initiative to answer. Since you are sitting here, it means that none of you are willing to hand over the cosmic cube to Tony. In that case, let's skip this question and look at the next one. How to deal with Tony. Everyone knows Tony's strength. If we want to deal with him, it is definitely not enough to rely on us alone. So, we must find a way to increase our strength. In addition, if you have any familiar superhumans, you can also introduce them. In short, everyone, don't be restrained. Any idea can be raised, as long as it is feasible. As the director of SHIELD, Nick's leadership is unquestionable. As soon as he opened his mouth, he completely defined the matter, instead of letting everyone continue to struggle with a choice. Sure enough, when the matter had a result, everyone was no longer silent and spoke freely. Steve proposed that everyone fuse symbiotes to enhance their strength. As a beneficiary, he knew very well how much the symbiote would increase the strength of superhumans. This was originally planned by Nick, but he had been cultivating new symbiotes before, so it was delayed. Now, Steve mentioned it, and Nick agreed to it. In order to deal with Tony, Banner also made a huge effort and took the initiative to propose that the blood in his body could give people powerful strength. He was willing to serve as a test subject to make strengthening drugs. As for Flint, Eddie and others did not have any constructive opinions, but they also expressed their determination to fight Tony. Under Nick's guidance, the heavy atmosphere in the conference room was swept away, and everyone became united against the enemy. Tony, who didn't know that Nick, who was determined to die, was going to default on his debt, suddenly received a call from Reed. After throwing Loki into the underground laboratory to study artificial intelligence, On the phone, Reed talked about his research progress and planned to take a spaceship to outer space to obtain the ultimate secret hidden in human genes. In this regard, Tony expressed his support and wished them a safe journey and then hung up the phone. In a blink of an eye, a week passed quickly. This week, Tony's life can be said to be calm. He went to the company during the day and either made an appointment with Natasha or found pots at night. He was tired of the taste and ordered a few plates of mountain grass and wild vegetables to change his taste. For this, Tony was on the cover of another issue of Playboy, which made countless people excited. However, on this day, Tony's leisurely life came to an end again. Reed and others came back, but they were all seriously injured and admitted to the hospital. Although he knew that this was the beginning of their change of fate, Tony rushed to Mariah Hospital as soon as possible. After all, it is better to brush up your favor as early as possible. If you can recruit all the Fantastic Four at once, then your own Shadow Corps can be fully unlocked. However, when Tony came to the hospital, he saw an unexpected person, Nick. Suddenly, Tony frowned. Why is he here? Puzzled, Tony walked over, and the crisp footsteps echoed in the hospital corridor. Nick outside the ward immediately turned around. After seeing Tony, Nick also frowned, obviously very surprised by Tony's appearance. Why are you here? Tony asked directly. I need Mr. Reed's advice on something. I heard that he was in trouble, so I came to see him. Nick had a smile on his face and was very friendly. People who didn't know would think that he and Tony were good friends. Seeing this, Tony was suddenly a little alert. Nick, this old shaman, was so kind today. It was strange. Could it be that he knew that Reed and others had acquired extraordinary abilities? This thought just popped up in his mind, but was instantly ruled out by Tony. He was able to know the news first because he had watched some movies in his previous life. Unless Nick was also a time traveler, he would not have known it at this time. Then if it wasn't for this matter, why did Nick appear here? He and Reed didn't have any friendship. A series of doubts arose in his mind, but unfortunately Tony did not find the answer. At this time, the door of the ward opened, and the doctor came out. He looked at Tony and said, you can visit, but they need to rest, and the time should not be too long. Hearing this, both of them nodded, and then Nick looked at Tony and said, shall we go in together? No, you go first, I'll wait. Tony rejected Nick's proposal. He wanted to see what Nick was doing today. Hearing this, Nick did not refuse, and turned and walked into the ward directly. However, when the door of the ward was closed, Nick's face showed a trace of solemnity. The reason why he came to Reed was for the enhancer. Although Banner was willing to provide blood as experimental material for S.H.I.E.L.D. to make enhancers. But what was embarrassing was that the scientists of S.H.I.E.L.D. could not analyze the mystery of the blood in his body at all, let alone make enhancers. For this reason, he specially investigated the scientists Tony had contacted when Banner was imprisoned. Finally found Reed. Chapter 86, Nick Fury, the Master of Humanity. Tony's sudden appearance almost made Nick think that their intention to make the enhancer had been leaked. But judging from Tony's behavior, it didn't seem like he knew about it. So what was Tony doing here? In the short few steps into the ward, Nick's mind was full of thoughts. Like Tony, he kept thinking about the purpose of the other party's visit. Neither of them thought that the other party was here to visit the patient. People like them would never visit patients unless they were relatives or had necessary interests. It can be said that everything they do is full of purpose. Soon, Nick calmed down and focused his attention on the ward, but when he saw the 4 people on the bed, Nick's mouth twitched. Reed and the other 4 were wrapped like mummies at this moment. Except for their mouths and eyes, the rest of their bodies were all wrapped in bandages, which looked very funny. Fortunately, Nick's key cultivation skills were good, and he didn't show any abnormality. There was even a trace of concern on his face. Are you all okay? After the words fell, Reed's weak voice sounded. Thank you for your concern. We are fine. I just don't know who you are, Reed said with a hint of doubt in his eyes. Nick seemed to have just reacted at this time. He patted his head and introduced himself. My name is Nick Fury. I'm from the government. I heard that there was an accident in your research, so I came to see you. Nick looked sincere, and Reed and others couldn't help but show a touch of emotion on their faces. Although their research accepted Tony's investment, it was originally funded by the government, so they naturally had a certain good impression of the government. Now that they were in trouble, Nick came to visit them on behalf of the government at the first time. They had just experienced danger and their emotions were fragile, so they were naturally more easily moved. Thank you Mr. Nick for coming to visit us. Our research failed this time and we really failed the government's expectations. Reed and others showed a trace of guilt in their eyes. Seeing this, Nick quickly said that it was okay, and then asked about the conditions of several people. How are your health conditions? What did the doctor say? After the words fell, the mood of several people became even more depressed. Johnny, the youngest among them, said in a depressed tone, "We have extensive burns on our bodies and necrosis of muscles all over our bodies. We will probably be useless in the future." After these words came out, the atmosphere in the ward suddenly became depressing. Even Reed, who was the most mature, was filled with sadness at this moment. Looking at the performance of everyone, Nick, who looked sad on the surface, was very happy at this moment. The purpose of his trip was to let Reed help develop the enhancer. But after meeting Tony, his purpose changed. He wanted to absorb all of them into SHIELD. He didn't know what Tony was plotting, but he knew that Tony's plot must be related to Reed and others. In this case, as long as he absorbed them into SHIELD in advance, no matter what Tony's plot was, it would be doomed. Thinking of this, Nick immediately encouraged, "Don't worry, the government will not let down any of the heroes. You have all made great contributions to this country. I will mobilize the best medical resources to treat you. In addition, you don't have to worry about work problems. On behalf of SHIELD, I solemnly promise that, as long as you are willing, you can enter our SHIELD and continue to participate in research work. And in order to compensate for the pain you may suffer in the future, I will give you a compensation of $1 million on behalf of the government." Nick looked thoughtful for them, and Johnny and his friends were stunned when they heard his words. They were already useless, almost useless, but Nick was willing to accept them, not only providing compensation, but also providing them with jobs. For several people who were in a trough, this was like a savior online. For a while, several people were moved to tears, but Reed was smarter than everyone else. Not only was he not moved by the conditions offered by Nick, but even the good impression he had just had disappeared in an instant, and he became alert. There is no such thing as a pie falling from the sky, let alone falling on your head. If it really happens one day, you must be vigilant. Maybe others have deeper plans. Their current situation is completely for useless people, and they haven't even passed the dangerous period, but Nick has offered various favorable conditions. To say that he has nothing else to ask for, and is completely out of humanitarianism is simply nonsense. Having lived in this country for so long, Reed has long seen the nature of this country. It is a pure capital face. When you are useful, you will be praised in various ways. Once you lose your value, no one will even look at you. Therefore, Nick's conditions not only did not make Reed excited, but made him instantly full of vigilance. "Mr. Nick, thank you for your kindness, but we have an agreement with Stark Industries, and the company will compensate us when the time comes." Reed brought up Stark Industries, which was equivalent to rejecting Nick's proposal in disguise. Hearing this, Nick remained calm on the surface, but became anxious in his heart. He didn't expect Tony to be so cruel, but he was unwilling to let him give up like this. He didn't know what was good about these people, but it was definitely worth Tony's personal trip. He had to take 2 people back anyway. Even if they were useless, he didn't mind raising a few useless people. "Mr. Reed, you can't say that. Stark Industries is not a charity, but capital. Do you think they will continue to support you when they find out that you have become useless people? Impossible. I think you know the face of capital better than anyone else. I'm different. I represent the government. As long as you are willing, you will always be a government employee in the future. In terms of fighting, Nick may not even be considered a scumbag, but in terms of understanding of human hearts and human nature, he is definitely a master." The few people who had just been stabilized by Reed hesitated after hearing this. Even Reed himself became uncertain. Although he knew Tony was not such a person, capital was always ruthless, and capitalists were even more ruthless. So he didn't dare to guarantee whether everything Tony had promised was still valid. Thinking of this, He couldn't stop others. Even he, who had the most contact with Tony, became unconfident, not to mention the others. They didn't have much contact with Tony at all, and all they knew came from gossip. At this time, they didn't dare to gamble on whether Tony's character was reliable. So, soon Ben, one of the four, took the lead in agreeing to Nick's invitation. "Mr. Nick, I'm willing to join SHIELD. Okay. What do you think, everyone?" Chapter 87. I have to give you a nice guy card. Nick smiled and looked at Reed and the other two, his eyes full of expectation. When Johnny saw Ben agreed, his originally undecided inclination completely turned to shield. "I agree too." After saying that, Johnny looked at Susan on the bed next to him. "Sister, you should agree too. If you miss this opportunity, there will be no next one." Hearing this, Susan opened her mouth, but in the end, did not agree directly. Instead, she looked at Reed and said, "Reed, what do you think?" After the words fell, Ben and Johnny also looked at Reed instantly. As the leader of the team, Reed still has prestige, but it is related to their own future, so Ben and Johnny made a direct choice. They naturally hope that Reed will agree, so that their small team can be together again. More importantly, as long as Reed agrees, they will not feel guilty about betraying the team. Looking at their expectant eyes, Reed sighed slightly, knowing that their small team has come to an end. "Sorry, thank the government for its kindness, but I have already belonged to Stark Industries." Reed refused directly. Nick's expression changed slightly, and then he smiled and said, "Are you worried about the penalty for breach of contract?" "Don't worry, no matter how much the penalty is, we will bear it directly. You just need to follow your heart and make a choice." Nick's promise can be said to be extremely generous, but because of this, Reed is more resistant. If you are too attentive to others for no reason, you are either a traitor or a thief. Although he didn't know this sentence, he knew that society is dangerous, so he still shook his head firmly. Looking at this scene, Nick's heart was suddenly filled with disappointment. If he knew what Reed was thinking, he would probably vomit blood. He just wanted to intercept, and he really didn't have any bad intentions. Although he was disappointed with Reed's refusal, at this point, he could only take one more as one. Then, "Miss Susan, what do you think?" Nick asked, but Susan ignored him, just looked at Reed sadly and said, "Reed, don't you plan to be with us?" "No." Reed refused decisively. He was not familiar with Nick, and he was more willing to trust Tony than him. Unfortunately, he couldn't influence other people's ideas, so he could only watch Ben and Johnny join SHIELD. When Susan saw Reed refuse, she subconsciously wanted to refuse, but Johnny called out at the side, "Sister." As soon as Susan finished speaking, the refusal she was about to say stopped at her lips. Her brother had already joined SHIELD, how could she abandon him? Suddenly, Susan smiled bitterly. "I agree to join too." As soon as she finished speaking, Nick smiled, and the faces of Reed and the other four darkened. The once close team, when faced with a future choice, finally chose to go their separate ways. The so-called Fantastic Four will never appear again in the future. They died before they were formed. Outside the ward, Tony sat on a bench in the corridor, and Happy stood beside him. Suddenly, the corners of Tony's mouth curled up slightly. "You turned evil without my training, Nick. You did a great job." He cheered in his heart, but on the surface, Tony still had a calm attitude. Tony, who was curious about what Nick was trying to do, had used telekinesis to cover the entire ward since he entered it and listened to all their conversations. When Nick was poaching people at the beginning, Tony did have the urge to break in. After all, these people were all members of the Dark Alliance that he had reserved. He dared to compete with him for people, and he couldn't kill him. However, before he left, he realized a problem. Although he could stop Nick and offer better conditions, how could he get them to join the Dark Alliance? After all, the Fantastic Four were upright heroes, not villains, and they were born to meet the purpose of the Dark Alliance, so they could join, as long as they agreed. If upright heroes wanted to join the Dark Alliance, they needed to further blacken themselves and fall into darkness to meet the Dark Alliance's standards for recruiting people, just like Peter once did. If they were to directly absorb the four of them, then based on their worldview, it would definitely be a painstaking task to make them blacken and meet the standards for joining the Dark Alliance. But after Nick intervened, things were different. Although it is natural for Johnny and the other two to choose to join SHIELD for their own reasons, from another perspective, isn't this a betrayal? The four have worked together for many years and have a deep relationship. Suddenly being betrayed, no matter how decent a person is, he probably won't feel good. This gives Tony the opportunity to more easily lead people into the darkness. Realizing this, Tony also remembered the test he conducted on Reed. At that time, he invited Reed to join the Dark Alliance, but did not get a system response. In addition to the fact that he was not Mr. Fantastic yet, it was probably because he still held on to justice in his heart. After sorting out his thoughts, Tony was no longer angry about Nick's interception, but wanted to thank him. As the saying goes, a bird in the hand is worse than 1,000 birds in the forest. It is like recruiting a group of heroes who cannot join the Dark Alliance. It is better to recruit a villain who can directly join the Dark Alliance. This is why Tony has been in love with villains for so long. Click. The door of the ward suddenly opened at this time, and Nick walked out with a smile on his face. Mr. Tony, I'm done with the visit. It's your turn. By the way, it's a little inconvenient for 4 people to squeeze into one room to recuperate. I've contacted the hospital to arrange a separate ward for them. Except for Reed, the other 3 will be transferred to other wards. Nick laughed, which was actually a naked show off. He had been suppressed by Tony for so long, and now he got it from him. Nick was very proud of himself, so he naturally wanted to show off. He believed that Tony could understand what he meant. However, the scene that he imagined Tony would be furious did not appear. On the contrary, after listening to him, Tony actually smiled. Is that so? Thank you for helping me to place them. I also have a headache about how to deal with them. After all, they are useless. It's unkind to ignore them, and it's a waste of money to care for them. You can take over them, which really helps me solve a headache. You are a good person. Tony casually gave Nick a good person card, ignoring Nick's confused face, and walked straight past him. Since he dared to show off in front of him, Tony didn't mind giving him a slap in the face. After all, the 3 people who hadn't shown their extraordinary abilities were indeed 3 useless people. As soon as they entered the ward, several nurses came in and transferred Johnny and the other 2 to another ward. They passed by Tony and looked at him with complicated eyes, while Tony watched them leave the ward with an indifferent expression without saying a word. Chapter 88 Betrayal is proportional to blackening. After Johnny and the other 2 had completely left, Tony sat down next to Reed with a smile on his face. How do you feel? Can you get out of bed? Hearing this, Reed rolled his eyes helplessly. Mr. Tony, do you think I can get out of bed? Compared to chatting with Nick, Reed's tone now has a more casual and comfortable tone. Those 3 losers are fine, but you have been injected with a booster, so stop pretending. Tony ignored his miserable appearance and said impatiently. Hearing this, Reed's eyes flashed with embarrassment, and then he remembered that Tony knew his background. At that moment, he, who was originally wrapped like a mummy and could not move, actually sat up from the bed by himself. If Johnny and the other 2 saw this scene, they would definitely be stunned. They were having difficulty even moving now, but Reed could move freely. Looking at this scene, Tony nodded and said, "That's more like it. How does it feel to be betrayed?" Tony said directly without any concealment. Reed looked at him in surprise. "You already know?" After saying that, he shook his head helplessly. "It can't be considered a betrayal. Everyone has their own choice." "Really? You think it's not a betrayal? Others may not think so," Tony said with a hint of meaning. After the words fell, Reed smiled. "I know them. They are not that kind of people. I believe they can understand me too," Reed said confidently. Hearing this, Tony's mouth corners suddenly curled up slightly. "Since you are so confident, then I will take you to see how they evaluate you behind your back." "No need," Reed said hesitantly. Tony said temptingly, "Don't you trust your own judgment? It won't make any difference to see it. Besides, aren't you curious about what kind of person you are in their mouths?" Curiosity is human nature. Even a genius like Reed can't avoid it. Although he had no idea at first, after Tony's repeated encouragement, curiosity finally overcame reason. "If you say so, then let's take a look. But how can we go to see it? We can't just watch it openly." Reed was a little confused. Tony smiled and didn't explain, but suddenly stretched out his hand to grab him. The next second, his soul was directly pulled out of his body by Tony. Although all of Tony's power comes from the system reward, it doesn't mean that Tony really has no ambition at all. When he has free time, he will still take time to study his abilities. Among them, the biggest progress is the sheep charm. Not only has it developed telekinesis, but it has also developed a way to extract other people's souls. In this way, the ability of the sheep charm is much stronger than in the anime. What's going on? Reed, who has become a soul body, looked at his illusory body in shock. Whether the soul exists has always been a major scientific research topic for contemporary scientists, but no one can prove it. But now, his soul has left his body, which is undoubtedly a great shock to top scientists like Reed. The power of the sheep spell flowed in his eyes. Seeing Reed's shocked look, Tony smiled and didn't explain. He didn't come here to discuss scientific issues with Reed. He wanted to take this opportunity to completely lead Reed into the darkness. Let's go and see what your friends are saying about you behind your back. After saying that, Tony walked out the door. Happy looked at the sleeping Reed in confusion and was about to follow Tony, but Tony's words came at this time. No need to follow me, you stay here first. Oh, okay, boss. Happy touched his head, not knowing where Tony was going. Outside the door, Tony and Reed quickly came to the intensive care unit. Nick was going to arrange a ward for each of them, but because they had just taken refuge, the three of them lacked a sense of security, so they wanted to stay with familiar partners, so they only opened one intensive care unit. When Tony came to the door, he naturally couldn't push the door open. He looked around the corridor and confirmed that there was no one and no surveillance. Tony's body sank and immediately merged into the darkness on the ground. When he appeared again, he had entered the ward and stood in the corner. Because his body was shrouded in darkness, people outside couldn't see Tony at all. At a glance, except that the light in this corner was a little dimmer than other places, they couldn't detect any abnormalities. Only Reed could detect his position, because his soul was controlled by Tony, but he couldn't see Tony's figure. As a soul, Reed can pass through most material things, so he floated directly into the ward and floated above the heads of Johnny and the other two. At this moment, Johnny and the other two were chatting below him, and the content of the chat was about Reed, but they didn't say anything bad. This made Reed, who was floating on the top of the room, feel relieved instantly. Although he was very confident before, he couldn't help feeling a little uneasy. Now that he had gotten the result, Reed turned his head and looked in Tony's direction and said confidently, "Well, I was right. They will respect my choice, just like I respect them." Tony, who was hiding in the darkness, heard this and a strange smile appeared on his face. At the same time, he used telekinesis to transmit his voice. "Don't worry, keep watching." After that, 3 dark auras that Reed could not see quietly entered the bodies of Johnny and the other two under Tony's command. Because they did not actively embrace the darkness, the dark aura would not stay on the 3 for too long, but during the time it stayed, it would magnify the dark side of the 3 people's hearts. Suddenly, under the influence of the dark aura, Johnny and the other two gradually changed their chat. "Ben, I still don't understand why Reed has to stay in Stark Industries and join S.H.I.E.L.D. with us to continue doing research together. Isn't that good?" Johnny, "Humph, isn't it because he sees that we have become useless and doesn't want to be with us anymore, for fear of dragging him down?" Susan, "That shouldn't be the case. Reed must be that kind of person." Johnny, "Sister, you are still speaking for him. If he doesn't want to abandon us, why doesn't he join S.H.I.E.L.D. with us? That person has already said that he will bear all the liquidated damages. What does he have to worry about?" Ben, "Johnny is right. Reed just wants to abandon us. He betrayed our friendship, this traitor." Susan, "You are right. He is indeed a traitor. He also betrayed my love with him. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 89, Dr. Victor of Doom is coming. As the saying goes, a kind word can warm you through the winter, but an evil word can hurt you through the summer. Reed floated on the roof, listening to the complaints of the three people below. His originally calm face gradually turned pale. He never thought that he would be such a person in the mouths of his companions, and even regarded as a traitor by them. Is he so unbearable in their hearts? Although he could no longer feel the cold and heat, after becoming a soul, Reed felt cold all over at this moment. Ben, we can't let him go so easily. A traitor should have a traitor's fate. Johnny, you are right. It is his dream to study the secrets of human genes. Although he failed this time, the research is not wrong. We will publish these data to let him know the consequences of betrayal. Susan, agree. Let's do it. The conversation between the three people below continued, but Reed didn't want to listen anymore, so he turned around and floated out of the room. After he left, the dark aura in Johnny and the other two also dissipated. Suddenly, the three people who were originally full of anger calmed down instantly and looked at each other in surprise. In the darkness, Tony glanced at the confused state of the three people, smiled, and left the ward. Back in Reed's ward, Tony shrugged his shoulders and looked at Reed, who had opened his eyes and stared at the roof with a dull look. Rest well first. I'll come to see you later. After that, regardless of whether Reed responded or not, he turned around and left the wood with Happy. The seeds of darkness have been planted, and now we just have to wait patiently for it to take root and sprout. Not long after Tony left the hospital, a young man in a suit and tie walked into the hospital with a bouquet of flowers in his hand. Because of his handsome appearance and mature temperament, the young man attracted a lot of attention along the way. When he came to the nurse's station, a black girl was preparing medicine, and the young man's gentle voice suddenly sounded. Hello, where is Reed's ward? After the words fell, the nurse looked up at the young man. Her face turned ruddy instantly, and then shyly said, it's at the end of the corridor, the corner. Well, I get off work at 6 in the evening. After that, the nurse copied a phone number, handed it to the young man, and made a phone gesture. The young man smiled gently, took the note, nodded to the nurse, and left. When passing by a trash can, the note that the young man had put in his bag was thrown directly into the trash can. In the ward, Reed was still in a daze. At this time, there was a sound of the door being pushed open. Reed did not turn around, thinking it was a nurse or a doctor. Hi, Reed, the young man said with a smile. Hearing the voice, Reed instantly turned his head to look at the person who came, with a flash of surprise in his eyes. Victor, why are you here? I heard that you were in trouble, so I came to see you. Your favorite tulips, Victor said, putting the bouquet on the bedside. The two were good friends in college, and they were also academic masters. If Tony hadn't intervened, Victor would have invested in Reed's research. Reed, who had just experienced a blow, looked at Victor's arrival with a touch of joy on his face. I haven't seen you for so long since graduation. I thought you went back to your country. Reed happily reminisced about the past, and Victor smiled and greeted him. Suddenly Victor changed the subject and said, I heard that you went to space this time, to observe the cosmic storm, obtain information, and crack the ultimate mystery of human genes. What was the result? Hearing this, Reed suddenly showed a bitter smile on his face. What else can it be? You see, I'm lying here now. Then you suffered in vain this time, and got nothing. Who said that? Although there was a little accident, I still got a lot of information. Reed retorted. Victor's face moved, and then he said calmly, really, congratulations. To be honest, I'm also interested in the information contained in the cosmic storm. Can you tell me about it? Hearing this, Reed was not surprised. Victor has always been very curious about the mysteries of the universe, since school. Sorry, Victor, I also want to help you, but the information is all in my mind now, and I can't find a suitable way to express it. Unless I study it for a while, and see if I can record it. Is that so? That's a pity, Victor said with regret. Seeing this, in order to change the subject, Reed was about to talk to him about interesting things in college, but he heard Victor continue to speak. Reed, I actually admire you, but you have the information I need in your head. Sorry, Victor said with an apologetic face. Reed's expression changed after hearing this. He was already sensitive after suffering a blow, so Victor's current behavior immediately made him alert. What do you mean? Victor, what do you want to do? It's okay, it will be quick. I will try not to make you feel pain. Victor answered irrelevantly, and at the same time, his right hand directly grabbed his head. Seeing this, Reed immediately didn't care about hiding, and the whole person jumped up and punched Victor. A strong sound of breaking through the air sounded, and Victor's face changed. The next second, his body instantly became illusory, and Reed's fist went through his body and landed on the wall. Boom. Reed punched a big hole in the wall, making a huge noise. At the same time, Reed, who was originally wrapped in gauze, also broke free from the gauze at this moment, and looked at Victor with his upper body naked and vigilant. Seeing Reed intact, Victor's eyes flashed with a gleam. "Are you waiting for me?" Obviously, seeing Reed's appearance, he thought Reed had already noticed his existence, so he set up a trap to wait for him. "No, I just want to rest in the hospital. I didn't expect you to do anything to me." "Victor, why? Have I offended you in any way?" Reed's face was full of doubts, and at the same time he was shocked in his heart. He didn't expect Victor to be an ordinary person. He and him had been in college for several years and didn't notice anything unusual. "You didn't offend me, but I need the information in your mind. But you seem to have changed. It seems that I need to do something." As he spoke, Victor raised his hand and pointed, and a vast energy wave gathered at his fingertips and bombarded Reed. All this is a long story, but in fact it was completed in an instant. Reed looked at the energy beam that was bombarding him, and his face changed instantly. He felt the breath of death in Victor's attack. "Ha!" Reed shouted loudly, not caring about hiding, and finally used all his strength. Suddenly, his body swelled up instantly, turning into a small giant several meters tall, with his hands against his chest, resisting Victor's energy beam. Chapter 90. Can't you let me rest? Boom. The terrifying shock wave blasted Reed away, and the entire ward was in a mess, as if it had been ravaged by a typhoon. Blood spurted out of Reed's mouth. He fell to the ground, and looked at Victor with a serious face, his thoughts turning, thinking about how to escape. Victor casually put away his fingers and shook his head, saying, "Clones are clones after all, and they can only perform to this extent." After that, Victor looked at Reed and said calmly, "Don't struggle. Although I don't know where you got this power from, your strength is still too poor. Surrender obediently, and you can suffer less." Hearing this, Reed's embarrassed face showed a smile. "After 4 years of college, don't you know me? When have you ever seen me give up?" "That's right." Victor smiled dumbly, and then shook his head. "In that case, I'll just send you on your way. Although it's hard to search for you if you're dead, it's almost the same." As he spoke, a burst of light shone from Victor's fingertips again. Seeing this, Reed's pupils shrank, and he glanced at the window behind him. He gritted his teeth, bounced up from the ground, and hit the window heavily. Bang! With the sound of the wall breaking, Reed crashed directly out of the window. With a strong sense of weightlessness, Reed subconsciously wanted to grab something. At this moment, a strange scene happened. His arm instantly extended infinitely, grabbing the railing on the top floor, and his falling speed also slowed down. At the broken wall, Victor, who was about to take action, saw this scene. His eyes suddenly condensed, and the attack that had been ready to be launched suddenly dissipated from his fingertips. He suddenly changed his mind. He wanted to catch him alive. If Reed's changes in the ward can still be attributed to mutation, then this method of body deformation cannot be explained by simple mutation. Therefore, after seeing this scene, Victor was sure that Reed must have obtained more things in the cosmic storm, but he concealed this information, or he didn't know. Such a good experimental material can't die like this. With this thought, Victor stepped directly through the broken wall, and the whole person was suspended in the air. Then, as if walking down the stairs, he walked towards the ground step by step. Reed landed smoothly, and had no time to feel the changes in himself. Although he was also surprised, his life was of course the most important thing at the moment. Looking back at the hospital behind him, Reed almost popped his eyes out. Victor actually violated the gravity of the earth, and walked towards him step by step. It was as if the gravity of the earth was completely useless to him. This was not a simple flight, but a walk in the air. For a moment, Reed felt a tingling scalp, and had a higher understanding of Victor's horror. Not daring to stay any longer, Reed took a step, and ran towards the distance, causing great chaos. At this moment, the whole hospital was in chaos, because of the two people, one after another explosion, Victor who could fly, and Reed who was 4 or 5 meters tall. Any of these would be enough to make the headlines of the New York Times, not to mention appearing together. People fled in all directions, causing many stampedes. When Reed came out of the hospital, he indirectly caused one car accident after another. Victor, who was suspended in the air, chased Reed. Seeing the huge commotion caused by Reed, he frowned. He had always been low-key and hated the feeling of being exposed to the world. It made him feel like a clown on the stage, trying to please everyone. But after Reed spread his long legs, his speed was not slow at all. In addition, he could not use more means, so he could not catch up with Reed for a while. He could only hang behind him and watch the situation get bigger and bigger. At SHIELD, Nick, who had just returned not long ago, had no time to catch his breath before his assistant rushed in. "Director, it's bad. There are extraordinary people fighting in the city. Now the city is in chaos." "What?" Nick screamed, and his face instantly became extremely ugly. Can't these people let him take a breath? It wasn't long after the alien incident was solved, and now someone is causing trouble in the city again. Do you really think that shield is just a decoration? Many thoughts flashed through Nick's mind. At this moment, the phone on the table rang. Hearing the ring, Nick's face became even uglier. He didn't even need to answer the phone. He knew who was calling. But at this point, he could only bite the bullet and answer the phone. As soon as he picked up the phone, as he expected, there was a burst of curses on the phone. The Minister of Defense directly greeted his mother and said that if this matter was not resolved well, he would be laid off, which completely ignited the suppressed anger in Nick's heart. After hanging up the phone, Nick looked at the assistant with a cannibalistic look and said in a low voice, "Call the captain and others to act. In addition, keep an eye on those two bastards. I want to twist their heads off myself." "Yes," the assistant responded and quickly left the office. Nick, with a gloomy face, was too scary. He couldn't bear it. Soon, the people of SHIELD and the military took action together. According to the route of Reed and the others, they quickly cleared the streets and formed a blockade. On the other side, Reed, who knew nothing, plunged directly into the encirclement. Although Victor noticed the actions of SHIELD, he ignored it. Although it was not his intention to make such a big noise. Now, nothing is more important than arresting Reed. Soon, Reed, who was running all the way, finally found something wrong. He saw a group of soldiers with live ammunition and people from SHIELD from a distance. Suddenly, he stopped running wildly, his face full of anxiety. Since he realized Victor's horror, he knew that Tony was the only one who could save him in New York. Therefore, the reason why he kept running wildly in the city and making such a big noise was to attract Tony's attention and let him come to save him. But he never thought that he met the official before he waited for Tony. He didn't think that the official was here to help him. Thinking about the noise he made, it was more likely that they would come to deal with him. Thinking of this, Reed became more and more anxious. This situation of wolves in front and tigers behind completely cut off his escape route. While Reed was getting anxious, Tony was at Potts's house, enjoying Potts's service. After leaving the hospital, he found Potts, who was taking a rare break, and spent time together. In order to avoid being disturbed, he threw away his cell phone. So, despite the chaos outside, he was still intoxicated by the gentleness, and could not extricate himself. Chapter 91 Why I Don't Know Your Trick. On the First Avenue, Nick looked at the huge figure that stopped in the distance with a cold look in his eyes. Seeing that the figure in the distance did not move for a long time, Nick waved his hand and the military began to press forward. Reed looked at the approaching military, then turned his head to look at Victor who was getting closer and closer behind him, and a trace of anger suddenly appeared in his eyes. If it were yesterday, he would never have a conflict with the official people, but now he has experienced the betrayal of his friend, and was chased by Victor all the way, which has already filled his heart with anger. Just as Tony expected, Reed's dark side was gradually excavated. "You force me to do it." Roaring in his mouth, Reed's figure instantly rushed towards the military. Boom. Boom. Heavy footsteps kept ringing, and the ground trembled with every step Reed took. Finally, the distance between the two sides was getting closer and closer. Reed was like a war beast, exuding a ferocious momentum, making many soldiers' hands holding guns tremble. Fire! Nick ordered loudly. Suddenly, the already tense military personnel seemed to have found an outlet to vent, and they opened fire instantly. Da-da-da. The gunshots sounded like a thunderstorm, and an endless storm of metal swept towards Reed. Ding ding dang dang. The bullets landed on Reed's skin, making a sound of metal collision. In addition to causing Reed to feel a pain, it did not cause any harm at all. Looking at this scene, Nick's expression did not change. He had already had enough understanding of the extraordinary people. The shooting just now was just to calculate Reed's defense. At the moment, Nick did not turn his head and said, "How is it? Can Apocalypse 1 penetrate his defense?" Behind him, a scientist from S.H.I.E.L.D. looked down at the instrument in his hand and said confidently, "No problem. His defense is much worse than Banner's, and Apocalypse 1 is enough to penetrate his defense." Hearing this, Nick nodded and waved his hand behind him. Suddenly, the military personnel made way, and the members of S.H.I.E.L.D. stood in front of the queue with strange weapons in hand. The weapons in their hands looked as huge as rocket launchers from a distance, but the front end was in the shape of a needle, full of science fiction. This was a new laser weapon specially developed by Nick to deal with Tony's shadow core. He had not planned to unveil it so soon, but Reed and Victor's behavior this time completely angered Nick, so he took out this killer. Zzz. Zzz. Apocalypse number 1 was launched, and a sound wave spread all around. Reed, who was originally running wildly, was caught off guard, and was directly hit by Apocalypse number 1. Suddenly, a violent explosion sounded around him. Reed's figure was directly blown away. Seeing this scene, everyone in S.H.I.E.L.D. became excited. Apocalypse number 1 can indeed fight against extraordinary people. With this thing, they will not be helpless against those extraordinary people in the future. Even Nick's mouth curled up a smile at this moment, and he was obviously very satisfied with this result. However, as the smoke and dust dissipated, and Reed's figure was revealed, everyone's excited expression suddenly stopped. Reed was completely black, and there was not a single wound on his body. Seeing this, Nick's face darkened instantly. The reason why he wanted to test Reed's physical defense was to allow Apocalypse number 1 to achieve success in one fell swoop and build confidence for everyone in S.H.I.E.L.D. After all, with the increasing number of extraordinary people, S.H.I.E.L.D. has been hit one after another, and its morale has almost disappeared. But now, Reed is unscathed, which is not only a slap in his face, but also a blow to S.H.I.E.L.D.'s morale. What's going on? Nick looked at the researchers behind him with a low gaze, and the researchers of S.H.I.E.L.D. were also not calm. Impossible. His defense is not that strong. It is impossible to block the attack of Apocalypse number 1. Hearing this, Nick said nothing, and turned to look at Reed again. Now is not the time to pursue responsibility, and solving the current trouble is the right way. Banner, please. Nick whispered to Banner not far away. Banner nodded, and Steve and others were also watching. In order to build confidence for the members of S.H.I.E.L.D., Steve and others did not take action immediately. Now that Apocalypse 1 has failed, they can only take action. Banner walked out of the crowd, and walked towards Reed. As the two sides approached, Banner's body gradually began to swell, bursting his clothes, and finally turned into a green giant. Boom. Without a word, the two huge fists collided fiercely. Suddenly, Reed's figure was blown away again, and fell heavily on the ground, smashing a big hole in the ground. "It's you." Reed looked at Banner with some surprise in his eyes. He did not see Banner's appearance clearly before, but now, he can see it clearly. When Banner heard this, a trace of doubt flashed across his face. "Do you know me?" "Yes, my power comes from you." Reed did not deny it. In an instant, Banner's breath was choked, and the power from him came. "Are you Tony's man?" "Yes." "You deserve to die." A low roar came from Banner's mouth, and the next second, Banner jumped high and smashed towards Reed, who was lying on the ground. The strong wind blew the smoke and dust around him. At this moment, Banner was like a god descending from heaven. However, just as he was about to fall on Reed, Reed's arm suddenly extended directly and punched Banner in the face. Banner, who had nowhere to borrow power in the air, was immediately punched out. Boom. His body rolled on the ground for several circles, crushing the ground. At the same time, a confused look appeared on his face. "Who am I? Where am I? Didn't you say that your ability comes from me?" But why don't I know your trick? Banner looked in the direction of Reed in confusion, and Reed also stood up from the ruins with a wanton smile on his face. Just now, he had already determined that he was not Banner's opponent after punching Banner. No one knows better than him how terrifying Banner's power is. After all, he has studied Banner for a long time, and the other party was lying in front of him like a little white mouse. If it was before, he would definitely have been beaten, but the scene in the hospital made him realize that he is different now. He tried it, and it turned out to be quite effective. Arsehole. Cursing angrily, Banner got up from the ground and rushed towards Reed again. But the scene just now appeared again. Reed's arm extended again and punched him from hundreds of meters away. As a pure melee fighter, Banner does not have the skills of long-range attack. The charge was interrupted again, and he quickly blocked it. Chapter 92. Don't I, the God of War, have any face? On the battlefield, two giants as big as hills fought fiercely across hundreds of meters, and it looked like a scene of equal strength. Outside the battlefield, Nick was about to ask Steve and others to come forward to help, but when he saw Victor appearing in the sky behind Reed, he had to shift his attention to Victor. Although Nick's own strength was not strong, as someone who had dealt with Tony and Loki successively, Nick keenly sensed that Victor was not simple. This was just a pure feeling, but he believed in this feeling. Therefore, Nick no longer paid attention to Reed, but focused all his attention on Victor. You go deal with that guy together. Be careful, that guy's not simple, Nick said to Steve and others with a serious face. Suddenly, Steve and others showed puzzled expressions on their faces, especially Thor. He was scared when facing Tony and Loki before, but this does not mean that he will be scared when facing others. He, the God of War in the God realm, Thor, is invincible. Don't be so serious, he can just fly. I'll take care of him, Thor said confidently, and rushed out without waiting for Nick to speak. As a god, flying is a basic ability. Thor passed the two big fools on the ground and intercepted Victor. Just when he wanted to show off his strength, before he could say anything, Victor said get out. Victor looked at Thor coldly, seeing through his nature at a glance, but he didn't care at all. He was just a god. He had seen many and killed many, so it was just like that. Hearing Victor's get out, Thor was stunned for a moment, and then he came to his senses, and a burst of anger suddenly surged in his heart. He, the dignified God of War in the God realm, didn't he have any face? Looking for death. With an angry shout, Thor swung the Thor's hammer in his hand instantly, and a bolt of lightning struck Victor directly. The lightning exploded in the air, shining silver white all around. If ordinary people saw this scene, they would probably lose their minds instantly. However, Victor still had a cold face, and didn't even blink. It's not enough to try to shake a tree. After saying this, Victor pointed his finger, and the terrifying energy wave condensed at his fingertips, and then it instantly burst out to meet the thunder. At the moment when the two collided, the imagined explosion scene did not appear. Victor's energy beam actually absorbed the power of thunder directly, and then shot towards Thor. Seeing this scene, Thor's face changed, and an incredible look instantly appeared on his face. How could it be possible? His attack was actually swallowed up. This thought flashed through his mind, and then the energy beam directly hit him. Boom. It was not until this time that the explosion sounded instantly, and Thor's figure flew back directly and fell in front of Nick and others. Seeing this, Nick and others' faces changed instantly, and their eyes were full of disbelief. Although Thor has always been quite arrogant, everyone still recognizes his strength. Even in S.H.I.E.L.D., he can be ranked in the top 3. Looking at the whole world, he is the best among the best. But now, Thor was hit and seriously injured in 1 second. This, everyone didn't know how to describe it for a moment. If Tony was here, he would definitely help them add that it was so terrifying. What should we do? Steve asked with a somewhat ugly expression. Nick was also silent at this moment. What happened to this world? Why did he always encounter these perverts? No matter what, he must be stopped, Nick said in a heavy tone. Hearing this, Steve nodded to show that he understood, and then walked towards Victor. Flint, Eddie and others also hurriedly followed. They passed through the battle zone between Reed and the others, and no one paid attention to the two stupid big guys. Compared with Victor, although Reed is difficult to deal with, it's nothing. Banner can hold him back. Looking at Steve and the others who intercepted him, Victor shook his head slightly. Is it because I have such a good temper that you think I really won't kill anyone? It was just a warning. If you continue to stop me, don't blame me, Victor said lightly, his tone as gentle as ever. But no one dared to ignore what he expressed. Steve raised his shield, looked at him solemnly, and finally said, "It's your duty, so stay here." After that, Steve swung the shield in his hand and launched an attack. As he did so, Eddie and Flint also attacked instantly. The sky full of yellow sand swept towards Victor, and every grain of sand had amazing lethality. Eddie turned into venom and pounced on Victor with a ferocious face. Compared with the handsome and gentle Victor, Eddie at this moment is more in line with the temperament of Evelyn. Victor's face did not change as he saw everyone's attacks. "Why don't you listen to advice?" he sighed, and a terrifying aura instantly emanated from Victor's body. At the same time, a vast force also gathered around him. Seeing that Steve and the others' attacks were about to fall on him, the indifferent Victor finally took action. He raised his hand and pointed, and a cold breeze blew past. At this moment, snowflakes began to fall in the area of 100 meters around him. "Freeze," Victor said expressionlessly. As his voice fell, the shield that was about to hit Victor suddenly slowed down, and the ice began to condense on the shield, and finally it was completely frozen, and fell in front of Victor. The yellow sand that swept towards him was no exception at this moment, and gradually froze as Victor spoke. The sand became crystal clear in the ice and snow, and it looked particularly pleasing to the eye. The most unlucky one was naturally Eddie. Whether Steve or Flint launched long-range attacks, only he stupidly thought of Victor and rushed up. So, at this moment under the ice and snow, Eddie's body became stiff, and the ice and snow appeared on his body at a speed visible to the naked eye, gradually covering his whole body, and completely sealing him in the ice. Seeing this scene, both Steve and Flint took a deep breath. An indescribable sense of horror surged into their hearts, and a question emerged in their minds at the same time. Is this guy still a human? Are you sure he is not a god pretending to be him? With just a wave of his hand, he can change the world. In the hot summer, a snowstorm fell directly. This was completely beyond the understanding of the two. For a while, the two stood there in a dilemma. Rushing forward would obviously mean death. Compared with previous opponents, Victor was more like a god than Thor. Retreating would mean violating his duties and betraying his beliefs, which was also something Steve could not accept. Chapter 93. Do you really think I have no temper? In the neighborhood where pots lived, Tony walked down from the second floor, poured a glass of wine, and sat leisurely on the sofa. He picked up the phone that he had thrown aside before, and suddenly, a series of push messages appeared on the phone interface. Shocked. Such a thing actually happened in the city of Neo. Look quickly. The secret hidden by the government. The extraordinary is around us. Oh my god. There are such monsters in the world. Looking at the title similar to a certain sea in his previous life, Tony's mouth twitched, but he still subconsciously clicked in. Suddenly, a series of news about Reed appeared on the phone. Those were photos taken when Reed escaped from the hospital, and there were also photos about Victor. Seeing this, Tony's eyes condensed, his fingers quickly slid across the phone screen, and his expression gradually became serious. Nick and others couldn't recognize Reed, but it didn't mean that Tony couldn't recognize him either. After all, he helped inject Reed's enhancer. Jarvis, search where Reed is. Okay sir, searching, confirmed. Mr. Reed is on First Avenue. Hearing this, Tony threw his phone aside, and with a thought, he immediately sank into a shadow on the ground. At the same time, Peter at home, Dr. Octopus in the laboratory, Norman who was testing the upgraded version of the Green Goblin armor, and Bucky and Happy, the two new friends, all appeared behind the Shadow Ninja. Seeing the Shadow Ninja suddenly appearing behind them, everyone was subconsciously startled, but knowing that the Shadow Ninja was Tony's army, although surprised, everyone did not resist, allowing the Shadow Ninja to put his hand on their shoulders and lead them to sink into the ground. There is a building more than 10 meters high next to First Avenue, and on the roof, the figures of Tony and others appeared one after another. Although Tony has not yet completely controlled the Shadow Kingdom, with the assistance of several major Shadow Legions, it is still no problem to use the Shadow Kingdom to travel briefly. Peter and others looked at the people who suddenly appeared beside them, and they were puzzled, not knowing what was going on. But after seeing Tony in front of the crowd, everyone quieted down again. Obviously, it was Tony who called them together, so they just had to wait quietly for his orders. It's really lively. Tony looked at the two sides fighting below, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. People who keep targeting him, do you really think you have no temper? After saying that, Peter on the side also took a look at the battlefield below, and said excitedly, is it time to fight? Hearing this, Tony looked back at him, and then his eyes swept over everyone one by one, with a smile on his lips, saying, that's right, everyone, it's time to show your value, let go and kill. Save the big guy, and kill as many as you can for the rest. Tony pointed at Reed and said, but his words were full of tyranny. Hearing this, everyone's reactions were different, but except for Dr. Octopus, everyone's eyes were full of desire to fight. After all, they are all people who have fallen into darkness, and no one will reject killing. At the moment, Peter couldn't help it first, and the whole person jumped directly from the tall building. The spider silk connected the building opposite, and Peter's figure drew a beautiful arc in the air. Seeing this, Norman was not to be outdone. He jumped up, stepped on the Green Goblin skateboard, and rushed into the battlefield with his signature weird laugh. Bucky and Happy jumped even more recklessly, ignoring the height of the building of more than 10 meters, and fell directly to the ground. For a moment, only Dr. Octopus stood there at a loss, not knowing what to do. After all, he has been studying, and this is the first time to fight. Seeing this, Tony smiled and comforted, go, your mechanical arm should also test its performance. But I can't fight. Dr. Octopus hesitated. Don't worry, it will help you. Tony pointed to the mechanical arm behind it, and suddenly, the mechanical arm seemed to understand Tony's words, and swayed slowly down. Seeing this scene, Dr. Octopus gritted his teeth and said, okay, then. After that, he jumped down directly like Happy and the others, which made Tony look very upset. Fortunately, the mechanical arm was really powerful. It moved at the same time, grabbed the wall of the building, and walked down step by step with Dr. Octopus. Otherwise, the famous Dr. Octopus might have to get a box lunch today. The members of the Dark Alliance appeared one after another, instantly attracting the attention of everyone on the battlefield. Nick looked at the members of the Dark Alliance who appeared, and his face changed instantly. Damn, why are these people here? What does Tony want to do? As he spoke, Nick watched the members of the Dark Alliance join the battlefield, and change the situation on the battlefield. Happy became as big as a hill, punched Banner, and directly blew away the unprepared Banner. After doing all this, Happy turned his head and looked at Reed not far away and grinned. The battle should be like this. After that, Happy chased after him. Norman stepped on the flying skateboard and rushed into the military camp. Pumpkin grenades were thrown one after another, as if they were free. The terrifying explosion sounded, and large areas of military soldiers were killed. With Norman's signature weird smile, he almost became the nightmare of the military soldiers. Peter, who was the first to take action, found Flint at this moment. He had never forgotten this guy, but Flint had been hiding in S.H.I.E.L.D., so Peter could not find a chance to take action. Now that he finally met him, how could he easily let this great enemy go? And Bucky, as expected, once again faced his good friend Steve, and continued to love and hate each other. However, after fusing with the symbiote, Steve's strength increased greatly. Bucky, who could once fight with him, is now completely no match for him, so he was beaten up as soon as he went up. Fortunately, at the critical moment, Dr. Octopus joined the battle and teamed up with him to form a 2-on-1 situation, which suppressed Steve. Not far away, Victor, who was originally planning to continue to attack Steve and the other two, was also stunned by the current changes. The situation changed too quickly, which caught him off guard, so he couldn't help but stop the action in his hands. However, with his keen observation, he noticed the place where the Dark Alliance appeared, and turned his head to look in the direction of the building. After a moment, he saw a figure looking down at him from above, like the King of Gods looking down at the ants on the ground. Seeing this, Victor frowned subconsciously, and his indifferent expression became serious. He felt a threat from Tony, which meant that Tony was very strong. The two looked at each other from a distance. Chapter 94, If I Can. I'll kill you. The two people's eyes collided in midair, and Tony was thinking about Victor's identity. He had never seen Victor, but the one who could find Reed should be the villain who appeared in the movie. Among the Fantastic Four, there is only one biggest villain, Doctor Doom Victor, a peerless power comparable to Ancient One and Thanos. However, if it was really Doctor Doom himself, the people of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Reed would definitely not be able to hold on until this time, and would have been wiped out long ago. So, either there is something wrong with Victor himself, or he is not the real one now. No matter which one it is, it means that Victor is not invincible now. Thinking about this clearly, Tony immediately put down his worries in his heart, and immediately drove his telekinesis to drag his body down from the tall building step by step, and walk towards Victor. This scene is exactly the same as the scene when Victor walked down from the hospital, but the abilities used between the two are different. Who are you? Looking at Tony approaching, Victor took the initiative to ask. This is the first time he took the initiative to ask the name of his opponent. Neither Thor before nor Steve and others later were qualified. Obviously, this is Victor's recognition of Tony's strength. My name is Tony, a rich man. Tony said in a calm tone, with a very cold attitude, which was inconsistent with his character of always liking to recruit villains. It's not that Tony suddenly changed his personality, but he knew very well that people like Victor would never surrender to him, so he naturally didn't want to waste his expression and saliva. Interesting self-introduction. Why, you want to stop me too? Victor's expression returned to indifference, and there was a hint of arrogance in his tone. Stop? Not really. I just want to see how strong a strong man of your level is. If possible, I will kill you by the way. Tony said lightly, as if he was telling a trivial matter. It's not that he has to be an enemy of Victor, but he knows that Victor will never let Reed go. People like him, once they decide on something, they must do it. Tony is the same. This is called the carnality of the strong, and they will not tolerate resistance from others. Therefore, unless he gave up Reed, it was almost certain that he would fight to the death with Victor. But how could Tony give up? Not to mention his pride, that would not allow him to bow his head. Reed's value alone was enough for Tony to keep him. Not to mention, Reed was also related to the system reward. Whoever dared to stop him from getting the reward would be his enemy. As the saying goes, if you don't agree, you won't say anything. As Tony's voice fell, Victor stopped talking, but there was a hint of murderous intent in his eyes. He raised his hand and pointed, and the terrifying energy fluctuations gathered at Victor's fingertips. The energy beam containing terrifying lethality broke through the shackles of his fingertips and rushed towards Tony. At the same time, two lasers appeared in Tony's eyes, and the power of the pig spell was activated, colliding fiercely with the energy beam. A violent explosion sounded, shaking all around. Just as the two people's energy attacks collided, the sky was covered with flying snow again, and the temperature within 100 meters dropped rapidly, exceeding 0 degrees in a blink of an eye, and snowflakes began to condense on Tony. But at this moment, a burst of hot flames instantly emerged from Tony's body surface, and the terrifying high temperature melted the ice and snow, and the ice and snow within 100 meters also quickly turned into steam at this moment. Below the two people, Venom was thawed and regained consciousness, but before he could catch his breath, the air temperature was getting higher and higher, causing him to scream, and his body began to melt gradually. Explode. A cold shout sounded from Victor's mouth, and suddenly a mysterious force acted around Tony. It was the magical mysterious explosion that Doctor Doom was good at, which could cause the dark particles in the void to collide and cause an explosion. A terrifying shockwave appeared around Tony and swept towards him. Venom, who was at the center of the battle, was affected by the way and was directly blown away. After landing, the seriously injured Venom instantly laughed out of his mouth, as if he had escaped from death. Although he looked miserable, his life was saved. Otherwise, if he stayed in the center of the battle, he would be completely melted by the high temperature sooner or later. After laughing, he looked up at the two people in the sky again, with awe in his eyes. After seeing how powerful the two were, his pride was completely shattered. His complacent strength was nothing in front of top figures like Tony and the others. Not to mention a head-on fight. Even the aftermath of the battle between the two was not something he could bear. At this time, the smoke and dust from the explosion dissipated, gradually revealing Tony's figure. He was still floating in the air, his body had not changed at all, and even the wrinkles on his clothes were the same as before. Seeing this scene, a glimmer flashed in Victor's eyes, and he saw through the mystery. In his eyes, he could clearly see a transparent wall of air blocking Tony's body, forming a barrier to resist the explosion, just like the mysterious force field he used before. For a moment, he did not continue to fight. He had already used the strongest means he could use now, but he still couldn't do anything to Tony, and there was no point in continuing. Similarly, Tony did not make any more moves, and fighting without being able to do anything to his opponent was meaningless. Since Victor didn't plan to continue, he was happy to do so. After this battle, Tony also realized his own shortcomings. He had many means, and was very strong, but he lacked the means to make the final decision, which was commonly known as the ultimate move. This made him, who was originally a little slack, feel a little urgent again. He must continue to strengthen his strength. Those people are all your men. Suddenly, Victor spoke. Tony didn't know what he meant, but he didn't bother to deny it and nodded directly. That's right. Leave Reed to me. I'll let them go. One person. I think it shouldn't be as good as a group of people. Why are you so confident that you can deal with them over me? Tony asked in surprise. Victor shook his head. Your strength is not bad enough to stop me, but I'm not alone. After speaking, Victor smiled mysteriously and recited a mysterious spell in his mouth. At the same time, a huge magic circle appeared in front of him. The magic circle exuded an evil breath. Under Victor's urging, a huge portal suddenly appeared on the ground. The portal was engraved with demonic patterns. When it was fully opened, Tony saw a lava world through the portal. Where is this? Tony frowned and asked. Victor was not stingy in answering. This is lava hell, where the lava demons live. Chapter 95. I'll come back to you when I get out of hell, Victor explained casually. Soon, violent roars sounded, and a 3-meter tall lava demon made of rocks leaped out of the portal. His body was filled with the texture of fire, and the rocks on his body were even more fiery red. A faint smell of sulfur emanated from him. As if smelling the air of freedom, the roar of the lava demon gradually became excited. In a short moment, one lava demon after another continued to leap out of the portal and occupied the land below. At the same time, Victor's voice sounded again, and his tone was a little proud at this moment. What do you think? You still have a chance to choose now. Although these guys are useless, they should be enough to deal with your men. Leave Reed to me, and I will retreat. This is your last chance. Listening to his words, and looking at his proud expression, Tony's mouth suddenly curled up a strange smile. Summon creatures? I have one too. Why don't you take a look at mine? After saying that, Tony's mind moved, and suddenly a large area of darkness gathered below him. One after another, shadow trolls walked out of the darkness, 3 meters tall, with a sturdy body, and dazzling skull eyes under the black body. Compared with the demons summoned by Victor, the shadow trolls are like dark creatures walking out of the abyss. In particular, compared with the chaotic scene of the lava demons, the shadow trolls are arranged in an orderly manner, and advance and retreat in moderation. If you have to compare, it is the difference between a regular army and a ragtag army, which completely surpasses the lava giants. Looking at this scene, a touch of ugly color climbed onto Victor's cheeks. Thinking about his previous threat, and looking at the current scene, it is simply a large-scale social death scene. Even with Victor's temperament, he may not be able to help but be a little angry. Tear them apart. A loud shout came from Victor's mouth. Under his command, the lava demons roared and rushed towards the shadow trolls. Watching their attack, Tony raised a disdainful smile, snapped his fingers, and then pointed forward, saying calmly, "Let him tear it apart." After that, the shadow trolls went straight to meet them. In an instant, the two legions collided like a tide, causing the earth to shake continuously. The lava demons not only have hard bodies, but also have the power of fire. Each one is comparable to a transcendent like Happy, or even stronger. In comparison, although the shadow trolls are invincible and strong, they have no extraordinary power, and are weaker than the lava demons in terms of lethality. Therefore, two shadow trolls on the battlefield can only match one lava demon. However, the shadow army is not known for its ability. Their greatest ability is immortality. The shadow trolls killed in the last second were resurrected in the Shadow Kingdom in the next second and put into the battlefield again. In such a continuous consumption confrontation, it seems that the lava demons have the upper hand, but they are getting fewer and fewer. Although Victor kept summoning lava demons to replenish his troops, as time went by, the entire battlefield was gradually occupied by shadow trolls, and the number of lava demons became fewer and fewer. Finally, with the last lava demon falling to the ground, the army summoned by Victor was completely defeated. An indescribable oppression emanated from Victor, and he stopped summoning. He saw that, no matter how many demons he summoned, unless they were demons with overwhelming power, they would not be enough to fight the shadow trolls. At that moment, Victor looked at Tony fiercely and said indignantly, "You win this round, but I will come back to find you." After saying that, Victor put away the magic circle and turned around to leave. But at this moment, Tony's face showed a mocking smile. "Want to leave? How much magic power do you have left?" As soon as these words came out, Victor's face suddenly changed, and his originally calm figure instantly accelerated and wanted to leave this place. But at the moment he fled, the power of the rabbit spell on Tony's body was activated. Suddenly, in the blink of an eye, Tony appeared behind Victor and gently placed his palm on Victor's shoulder. The scorching flames instantly spread from his palm. Bang! The flames ignited wherever they met and spread directly to Victor's whole body. A burnt smell emanated from him. Suddenly, Victor's expression changed drastically, and he wanted to mobilize his strength to suppress the flames on his body. But with Tony's endless supply of power, his resistance was quickly extinguished, and death filled Victor's heart. At that moment, Victor turned his head to look at Tony, his eyes filled with murderous intent, and said, "Wait until I get out of hell. I will come to you again." As soon as he finished speaking, the flames completely engulfed him, and his body was directly burned to ashes. A breeze blew, and the ashes were blown away between heaven and earth. Tony stood proudly in the air and said to himself calmly, "I'm waiting for you to come." After speaking, Tony turned around and looked at the battlefield behind him, his expression indifferent. Although Victor was dead, it was clear from the words he left behind that this was not his real body. And an avatar or clone was not much different from the current self, which showed how terrifying Victor's real body was. But Tony was not afraid. It had only been a short time since he went from being an ordinary person to now. He believed that, when he met Victor again next time, he would not say that he would suppress him, but he would definitely not be afraid of him. So his threat was a joke to Tony. "It's time to end." Looking at the battlefields not far away, Tony whispered to himself. Then his figure slowly floated towards the direction of SYNOPSIS, like a god inspecting his territory. As his figure moved forward, shadows began to appear on the street. Shadow ninjas, shadow claws, shadow night bats, shadow trolls, shadow warriors, and in a short moment, the boundless shadow army completely enveloped the entire First Avenue. The people from SYLD and the military looked at this scene, and boundless fear suddenly rose from their hearts, and everyone's face was filled with fear. Even the extraordinary people who were fighting stopped. Steve and others watched this scene in fear, and the people of the Dark Alliance also swallowed their saliva subconsciously. They had seen the Black Shadow Corps, but they had never seen so many Black Shadow Corps. It can be said that wherever you look, it is all dark. Such a scene made everyone tremble and feel fear subconsciously. In the crowd, Nick watched this scene with trembling body. When his eyes touched Tony in the sky, he suddenly shouted, "Tony, stop." Hearing the voice, Tony didn't even look at him, but looked down at everyone below with an indifferent expression, and waved his hand casually. Kill. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 96. Don't think too much. Tony's voice was not loud, but it sounded like a judgment of the gods to everyone, making everyone's hearts tremble. Especially when the Shadow Army rushed over, everyone felt the pressure like a mountain. The Shadow Night Bats were flying in the sky, and beams of energy were fired from their hands, falling into the crowd below, setting off a series of explosions. The sharp blade army kept jumping forward onto tall buildings on both sides of the road, and their sharp claws flashed with a cold edge, and they directly brought blood flowers when they fell into the crowd. The shadow trolls collided head-on, relying on their tall bodies and terrifying defenses. They became the nightmare on the front battlefield, easily smashing the military soldiers into meat patties, and every punch and kick made the earth tremble. As for the shadow warriors and shadow ninjas, they kept wandering in the shadows, either not moving or killing. Blood flowers bloomed in the air, killing bloomed in the sun, and even the most elite soldiers could not resist the army from darkness. Collapse and wailing became the main theme of the battlefield. Under killing, all beings are equal. Behind the army, Nick stared blankly at the scene in front of him, as if he had lost his soul, his face extremely pale. On the battlefield, Steve and others also came back to their senses at this moment, looking at the Black Shadow army that was killing, and they rushed up one by one with roars, trying their best to resist. However, when manpower is exhausted, the Black Shadow army represents the general trend at this moment. How can people compete with the general trend? Moreover, the people of the Dark Alliance are not idle. As Steve and his men took action, the people of the Dark Alliance also took action to meet them. In the crowd, Flint kept raising wild sand to resist the impact of the Black Shadow army. Suddenly, Peter's figure suddenly appeared behind him and punched him in the back. Bang! A huge force penetrated his body, and a piece of sand slid down his chest. In the sky, Norman quickly arrived on a skateboard, still laughing strangely, and then 2 pumpkin grenades were accurately thrown into the hole in Flint's chest. Peter saw this, and immediately pulled away. The 2 former enemies completed a perfect cooperation. Sensing this scene, Flint's expression changed drastically, and he screamed in horror, "No!" The next second, a loud bang sounded. The pumpkin grenade exploded in Flint's body, and the terrifying electromagnetic pulse directly tore his body apart. Flint was instantly dead, and the yellow sand that made up his body was completely evaporated in the explosion, and no longer existed. So far, Flint, whose fate was rewritten and joined S.H.I.E.L.D., was killed. On the other side, when the S.H.I.E.L.D. people continued to resist under the leadership of Steve, Venom was constantly fleeing. He was the only defector among the many extraordinary people in S.H.I.E.L.D. He was not a decent person. If his life was not threatened, he could follow the justice in the host's heart and be a good person, but when his survival was threatened, justice was nothing. So, when he saw Tony start to kill, he didn't hesitate at all and turned around and ran. With his speed, it would not be easy to escape the encirclement of the Shadow Core, but it was not difficult either. But when he was escaping, Dr. Octopus spotted him. As a mad scientist, Dr. Octopus noticed the difference of Venom from the beginning. Alien life like him undoubtedly has a fatal attraction to scientific researchers like Dr. Octopus. Therefore, in the chaotic crowd, Dr. Octopus always locked his trail firmly. The 4 mechanical arms were like 4 wheels at this moment, leading Dr. Octopus to chase Venom. Soon, Venom, who had not escaped the encirclement of the Shadow Core, was intercepted by Dr. Octopus. A burst of air-breaking sound rang out, and 2 mechanical arms, one in front and one behind, pierced the air at a very fast speed and attacked Venom. Sensing the movement, Venom turned around without thinking, swung his fist, and collided heavily with the mechanical arm. Bang! With a loud bang, the terrifying force fell on Venom, smashing him directly into the ground. The next second, another mechanical arm attacked, piercing through his body and nailing him to the ground. Ouch! A strange roar sounded, and Venom struggled violently, but the mechanical arm was like a screw that was fixed tightly, and no matter how he struggled, he could not break free. Suddenly, Venom, who sensed the threat, could no longer care about anything else, and forcibly separated from Eddie, the host, and turned into a pool of liquid to escape. This change also made Dr. Octopus dumbfounded. He didn't expect things to turn out like this. Looking at Eddie, who was completely dead on the ground because of Venom's separation, Dr. Octopus pulled out his mechanical arm and quickly chased Venom. Unfortunately, with his super strong vitality, although Venom was damaged one after another under Dr. Octopus's attack, he always maintained a very fast escape speed. If nothing unexpected happened, Venom's escape would have been a foregone conclusion. Unfortunately, he forgot that in the sky, Tony was looking down at the entire battlefield like a god, and everything on the battlefield was under his eyes. Just when Venom was about to escape, an irresistible force suddenly enveloped him. The next second, he flew off the ground and floated into the sky. Hiss. A sharp hissing sound rang out, and Venom looked at Tony in the sky and made a frightened sound. Having personally experienced the horror of Tony, he knew very well that once he fell into Tony's hands, only death would be waiting for him. Unfortunately, the huge difference in power doomed all his resistance to be in vain. In the end, Venom still fell into Tony's palm. Tony just glanced at him, and a flame suddenly ignited in his hand. Then, with a piercing hissing sound, Venom was burned into gas. Seeing this, Dr. Octopus' eyes flashed with a trace of pity. He still wanted to study it, and Tony's voice also sounded in his ears at this moment. Don't worry, there are still many such life forms. I'll get you another one later. Hearing this, Dr. Octopus smiled, no longer entangled, turned around and continued to kill. In the distance, Nick watched the extraordinary people of S.H.I.E.L.D. being killed one after another, and he panicked. If all the extraordinary people died, S.H.I.E.L.D. would be completely destroyed. He would not allow such a situation to happen. At that moment, Nick held a loudspeaker and shouted loudly, "Retreat. Everyone, retreat." Steve and his companions in the crowd, who were surrounded by danger, received the order, looked at the surrounding situation, and a trace of sadness flashed in their eyes. They knew that they were powerless to save the situation. Staying here would not change anything, except losing their lives, so they did not refute Nick's order, and began to retreat. Nick's words also attracted Tony's attention. Tony flashed and appeared next to Nick in the next second. Seeing this scene, Nick's heart skipped a beat, and he couldn't help but feel the determination to die. He didn't say anything at that moment, just looked at Tony to see what he wanted to do. Tony's hands fell on Nick's neck at some point and lifted him up little by little. "Where are my things?" Tony asked indifferently. As soon as he finished speaking, Nick realized what Tony was talking about and immediately said hoarsely, still at SHIELD, "I'm tired of waiting. I think you don't want me to take it myself." Plop. Tony threw Nick to the ground and said slowly, "I advise you again, don't think that you are still alive now because of the existence of that woman. Just because you are still a little useful to me. Don't think too much. Get out." Chapter 97. What is achievable? This is achievable. After watching Nick and the others leave, Tony did not continue to order the pursuit. At this moment, except for the people of the Dark Alliance, there was no living person on the First Avenue. All of them turned into corpses. The scene of broken limbs and arms was heart-shaking. Even the people of the Dark Alliance who participated in everything personally were still terrified after calming down. They mainly targeted Steve and others, and did not kill too many ordinary people, so these corpses were all masterpieces of the Black Shadow Corps. Thinking of this, everyone subconsciously glanced at the surrounding Black Shadow Corps. Coincidentally, the Black Shadow Corps also cast their scholar eyes on the people of the Dark Alliance, as if they were the next target of killing. Suddenly, the people of the Dark Alliance felt a tingling scalp. Fortunately, at this time, Tony spoke up to break this weird atmosphere. "Reed, are you okay?" Tony's voice was not enthusiastic, but it touched Reed in the crowd. "Boss, it's okay." Reed's tone was much more respectful than before, if he had only regarded Tony as a boss before. But after this time, Tony led people to rescue him, and even went to war with the authorities for him, which completely made him return to his heart, and regarded Tony as his master. Seeing this scene, the people around him also had mixed feelings. They gathered around Tony for various reasons. In their opinion before, both sides were more of a use of relationship, but this time, they saw Tony's sincerity. Tony really regarded them as his own people, not tools to be thrown away after use. For a while, the relationship between the Dark Alliance was inexplicably warmer than before. Even Norman, who joined the Dark Alliance under threat, looked at Tony with a touch of recognition. Tony naturally didn't know about the changes in everyone's hearts. He just did what he should do. After confirming that Reed was fine, he also arranged the follow-up matters. "The Shadow Corps will clean up the battlefield. You go and clean up the surrounding surveillance." "Okay." Everyone responded in unison and dispersed. At the same time, the Shadow Corps also acted quickly, dragging the corpses on the ground into the Shadow Kingdom to destroy them. This approach gives people a feeling of covering one's ears and stealing a bell, but it is a necessary process. Tony still has to continue living in this country, so the rules of the game must be followed. Although many people saw him kill people, as long as there is no direct evidence, it will be useless, no matter how many people saw it. Because even if there are 10,000 people testifying that he is guilty, he can also let 100,000 people prove his innocence. As for what the truth is, no one will care. As long as everyone can get by, the matter will end here. This is capital. Even the power of the state must give way to capital. A free country. Tony found that he gradually fell in love with this country. While Tony was cleaning up the scene, the news was spread by the evacuated SHIELD. Thousands of people died, most of whom were military soldiers, and the news could not be concealed at all. For a time, the entire upper class of the United States was shocked. Government departments and military leaders took action one after another. Some people clamored to sanction Tony, and even proposed to use the army to suppress Stark Industries directly. But more people who were related to Stark Industries refuted their proposal, and kept talking to them. In Potts' room, Potts, who was resting, received a call from the upper echelons of the United States. She, who was originally tired, suddenly became shrewd and strong. Did Tony kill someone? Impossible. This is absolutely slander. Want to suppress Stark Industries by force? Call all the congressmen who are related to us, initiate a parliament, and sanction those bastards. Who in the White House asked about this? Don't worry about it, I will find someone to make him shut up. Orders were issued from Potts' mouth in an orderly manner. Facing the pressure from the upper echelons of the United States, she didn't think about it, and stood on Tony's side directly. After hanging up the phone, Potts didn't rest, and continued to make calls one after another, mobilizing all the relationships of Stark Industries. In addition, the relationship network of the O-Style Group was also mobilized by her. As Tony is the major shareholder of the O-Style Group, and she exercises the authority of the major shareholder on his behalf, she is naturally able to mobilize these relationships. Soon, under the joint efforts of the two major groups, all the remarks against Tony and Stark Industries were suppressed. The military leaders who had been clamoring before also shut up at this moment. Everyone was stunned by the joint offensive of the two major groups. At this point, an event that should have caused a big uproar was quietly calmed down. This is the horror of the Cheeble. Manipulating the parliament and playing with the regime is the normal phenomenon of the upper class of the United States. Of course, it was also because Tony made too much noise that caused such a big wave. If there were not too many deaths and the military was involved, no one would care about the deaths of a few people. SHIELD. At this moment, a dark cloud shrouded the entire SHIELD. From Nick to ordinary members of SHIELD, everyone was full of depression. The operation failed. SHIELD suffered heavy losses and reported the matter. As a result, the matter was directly suppressed. All of this made everyone in SHIELD feel confused. In the conference room, Steve looked at Nick with anger on his face and asked loudly, "Why is this happening? Why is no one doing anything about this? Tony killed so many people, and so many people in the military died. Isn't there anyone punishing him?" Steve roared in confusion, and the others looked at Nick angrily, wanting him to give an explanation. The deaths of Flint and Venom filled their hearts with anger, and now the government's inaction made them even more furious. Looking at the expressions of the crowd, and listening to Steve's questioning, Nick's face showed a self-deprecating smile. "How can we do it? Do you have evidence to prove that he killed people?" I asked someone to check the surrounding surveillance, and he cleared them all. Without evidence, even if all of us in SHIELD prove that he is guilty, he can make more people admit that he is not guilty. Captain, times have changed. Now it is the world of the Cheebles, not the world of the American people. After saying that, Nick closed his eyes tiredly and stopped looking at the crowd. In the previous Life movie, why did SHIELD become more and more powerful over time? In addition to the frequent occurrence of extraordinary events, which increased SHIELD's authority, it was also because Tony was also a member of SHIELD. With the support of the Cheeble behind it, SHIELD's authority became greater and greater, and even gradually broke away from the control of the upper class of the United States. Now, Tony has not joined SHIELD, and SHIELD's actions have been constantly failing. No one supports it, and things are often messed up, which has completely led to the continuous compression of SHIELD's authority. Now, under the suppression of Achievable, there is no ability to resist. As the director of SHIELD, Nick is the most uncomfortable one. Especially the few words Tony said to him before, which are still echoing in his ears at this moment. Tony really dares to kill him. Even if Tony knows the existence of Captain Marvel. Think about it carefully. If Tony really wants to kill him, will he have a chance to take out the pager? Even if he gets in touch, when the Captain Marvel, who is still wandering on an unknown planet, comes back, his grave will be 3 feet high. Looking at Nick's appearance, Steve, who wanted to say something, opened his mouth, but in the end, he couldn't say a word. The other side, although they were unwilling, they knew that this was the only way to deal with it. They couldn't beat Tony outside the rules, and they were no match for Tony within the rules. There was no other way to go, except to bow their heads. Chapter 98. The villa was bombed again. Potts' residence was followed by the sound of a door opening. Tony walked into the room, and just as he came to the living room, he saw Potts sitting on the sofa in the living room. Tony had an awkward smile on his face. "Why are you up? Why don't you take a rest?" Hearing this, Potts turned his head and looked at him, then rolled his eyes. "It's rare that our Mr. Tony still cares about me. I woke up and found that I was the only one. I thought I was abandoned like those garbage." Hearing this, Tony coughed dryly. He was always confident, but at this moment he suddenly felt guilty. The garbage in Potts' mouth was naturally not garbage in the ordinary sense, but the female companion he brought back. Tony smiled and sat down beside Potts, holding her in his arms. "What are you thinking about? How can those people compare to you?" Potts did not resist Tony's move, but fell into his arms. A trace of worry appeared on her face and she said, "Tony, I don't know what you are doing now, but don't do such dangerous things next time, okay? You have so much money, you can pay someone to do it. Why do you have to do it yourself?" Potts' topic jumped quickly, but Tony instantly grasped the meaning of her words. Obviously, she already knew what happened on First Avenue. Seeing the worry on her face, Tony's eyes flashed with a hint of tenderness. "You know everything? Don't worry, no one can hurt me. But don't worry, I will definitely not do this kind of thing myself in the future, I promise." Potts nodded silently and pecked Tony's lips gently. A peaceful and warm atmosphere filled the room. This feeling intoxicated Tony, and for a moment, the anger accumulated in his heart because of the killing dissipated a lot. A month passed in a blink of an eye. The playboy was back. Spending money and picking up girls became Tony's greatest pleasure. He brought a different female companion home every night. If Tony's body had not been changed, he would have been unable to bear the nightly revelry. Just when Tony was enjoying his life, his house was bombed again. 3 helicopter fighters dropped bombs on his beach villa, almost destroying it into ruins. The reason why I said almost was because Loki was in the beach villa. After noticing the movement outside the villa, Loki used illusions to influence the helicopter pilot and dropped the bomb on the sea. Although it caused an explosion, it did not affect the villa. As for the 3 helicopters, they were wiped out by Loki at the same time as the bomb was dropped and disappeared completely from the world. When Tony got the news, he was stunned. He didn't expect such a thing to happen. He had been staying overnight in the beach villa before, but because he was too noisy, he was driven out by Loki. After all, no one wants to listen to others making people every night. After receiving the news, Tony rushed back to the villa as soon as possible. Villa, living room. Looking at Loki sitting on the sofa, Tony asked curiously, "What's going on?" Hearing this, Loki shrugged his shoulders and said he didn't know. He had become a science fan and had been studying artificial intelligence during this period. If he hadn't noticed that the villa was suddenly attacked, he might not have walked out of the underground laboratory. Seeing this, Tony could only change the person he asked. "Jarvis, have you found anything?" "Sir, yes, those 3 combat helicopters were traded to the military by Stark Industries at the beginning of this year. They are LM models." After speaking, Tony's eyebrows slightly raised. Helicopters from the military, revenge from the military? As soon as this thought came to his mind, Tony threw it out of his mind. It's been a month, and the military shouldn't have waited until now to retaliate. Besides, they don't have the courage, so military revenge can basically be ruled out. At this moment, Jarvis' voice suddenly rang out. Sir, I just found a piece of news. I think it may be helpful to you. After speaking, Jarvis projected a video on the wall. A gloomy middle-aged man appeared on TV, wearing sunglasses on his nose, and arrogantly announced a terrorist declaration, saying that he would launch a terrorist attack on the United States. He also announced a series of attack locations, including the address of Tony's villa. Looking at this scene, a strange look flashed across Tony's face. This scene seemed a little familiar. It seemed to have appeared in the third movie of Iron Man in his previous life. Suddenly, Tony couldn't help but fall into deep thought, thinking about what the third movie of Iron Man was about. Unfortunately, after a lot of thinking, he didn't get more useful information. He only remembered a few keywords: pioneering technology and the desperate virus. As for more information, sorry, I almost forgot it. Interesting. Are you targeting me on purpose? Tony muttered to himself, and then turned to look at Loki. How about it? Can you use the cosmic cube to lock the guy's position? Tony pointed to the person on the projection. Before, S.H.I.E.L.D. was completely scared in one fell swoop, and sent the cosmic cube over the next day. Although this thing is very precious, Tony has no great use for it now, so he simply gave it to Loki and asked him to study and use it. Just like the mind gem on Loki's scepter, he did not snatch it. Listening to Tony's words, Loki nodded. No problem. Although it can't fully exert its power, it is still no problem to shuttle and lock. In this case, let's go and see what this guy is, Tony said with a smile. Loki also smiled, then stood up from the sofa, raised his hand and waved, and suddenly, the cosmic cube appeared in front of Loki. Under Loki's urging, it directly locked the position of the man in the projection, and then opened a space door as high as a person. Seeing this, Tony and Loki did not hesitate, and walked in one after another, and the cosmic cube disappeared instantly. Eagle Country, in a manor. A portal suddenly opened, and Tony and the other person walked out. Telekinesis emanated from Tony's body, instantly covering the entire manor. For a moment, the scenes in the manor were all immersed in Tony's mind. There was no strict guard, and no danger was found. Except for the gloomy middle-aged man who was still announcing his terrorist declaration in a villa in the manor. There was no sign of a terrorist lair here. Let's go and see who this guy is. Tony smiled and called out, and Loki followed. Soon, the two came to the outside of a room. With a move of telekinesis, Tony directly cut off the live broadcast equipment in the room, and then pushed the door open. Seeing Tony and the other person suddenly appearing in front of him, the middle-aged man in the room panicked. Who are you? He looked at Tony and the two strangers who broke into the house with a trembling voice, and there was no trace of the arrogance he had on TV. Chapter 99. Multiple enemies for no reason. You just attacked my house, and now you ask who I am? Tony said with a playful smile on his face, and kept looking at the man. He was physically weak, without extraordinary abilities, just an ordinary person, cowardly, and timid, and did not meet the standards of a terrorist armed force at all. With just one glance, Tony saw through the guy in front of him. In general, he was just an ordinary person, and there was nothing worth paying attention to. At this moment, the man was stunned for a moment when he heard what Tony said, and the next second he seemed to realize something, and the whole person was completely panicked. Are you from the US government? Misunderstanding, misunderstanding, all misunderstanding. I'm just acting. I'm not a terrorist. As he said that, the man quickly raised his hands and made a gesture of surrender. Seeing this, Tony naturally didn't mind pulling a tiger skin, and his face sank and said, "Tell me, who instructed you to do this?" I don't know. A gentleman gave me a lot of money and asked me to do this. He said he wanted to invite me to act. As an actor, I naturally couldn't refuse," the man said quickly with a crying tone. He was afraid that, if he spoke slowly, Tony would take out a pistol and shoot him in the head. After all, American movies are played like this. And Tony looked at him. Although he didn't believe him completely, he believed 80%. This guy looked like he couldn't carry anything on his shoulders or lift anything with his hands. He was completely unqualified for the job of a terrorist. However, He didn't let him go, but carefully questioned him about all the information he wanted to know, almost asking him to collapse. After confirming that all the information this guy knew was squeezed out, Tony let him go, turned to look at Loki and said, "Let's go." Loki, who had been watching from the side, nodded, summoned the cosmic cube again, opened the space door, and the two stepped into it and left. Beach Villa. As Tony and his partner appeared, Jarvis' voice also rang out. "Welcome back, gentlemen." Hearing this, Tony raised his eyebrows and smiled. "Jarvis, your intelligence is getting higher and higher. It seems that you have gained a lot during this period of time. Thanks to Mr. Loki, I have recently upgraded myself again, and it is more perfect than before." Jarvis answered fluently, and Tony did not continue to ask about this issue. Instead, he changed the topic and said, "I will tell you a few pieces of information. Can you help me search for the existence of this person?" "Okay, sir." Jarvis agreed immediately, and Tony began to dictate the information he had interrogated from the Eagle Country man. He did not know the specific identity of the person behind the scenes, but he had seen the appearance of the person behind the scenes. Under Tony's threat, he described the appearance of the person behind the scenes in great detail. For ordinary people, even if they knew this, it would not be easy to find the person behind the scenes. But with the help of Jarvis, it was not a difficult thing for Tony. Ding, searching. On the wall projection, photos flashed by quickly. Jarvis, which was connected to the US database, could retrieve the information of almost most people in the US. Tony looked at the flashing photos without any hurry. He poured a glass of wine for himself and Loki, and then sat on the sofa quietly waiting. 10 minutes later, suddenly, the fast flashing photo projection stopped, and 3 men appeared on the wall, and Jarvis' voice sounded at the same time. "Sir, according to the information you provided, there are only 3 targets in the database that meet the information. Ordinary citizen, Mr. AILUO. AIM founder, Mr. Killian. Government employee, Mr. Harder." Jarvis introduced the identities and backgrounds of the 3 people. Tony's eyes swirled around the photos of the 3 people, and at the same time, a memory that had been forgotten deep in his mind was also recalled by him. Many years ago, Killian had looked for his predecessor and wanted to cooperate with him. But his predecessor was arrogant and looked down on this guy, so although he agreed to it, he stood him up and didn't go at all. The next day, Killian went to Stark Industries and asked why his predecessor had broken his promise. He was ridiculed by his predecessor and had someone drive him out. This was just a small matter for his predecessor, and he had forgotten it long ago. If he hadn't seen Killian's photo, Tony wouldn't have remembered it. After all, a person's memory is vast and vast. What you see, hear, and forget every day will settle in your mind. Only under certain opportunities will you remember the forgotten memories. Shaking his head helplessly, Tony didn't know how to evaluate his predecessor's style of doing things. Although he is a genius, he is really bad at dealing with people. Perhaps this is what a genius should be. Unfortunately, now his predecessor is him, and he must bear the consequences of what his predecessor did. "Check where Killian is now," Tony ordered casually. The next second Jarvis' voice suddenly rang out. "Sorry, sir, we can't find Mr. Killian's whereabouts." Tony frowned, but didn't say much. Although Jarvis's ability is powerful, his activities are limited to the internet. If someone deliberately blocks his information, it is normal that he can't find it. But in this way, Tony's idea of taking the initiative was shattered. No matter what grudge Killian had with his predecessor, now that he has taken on this grudge, Tony will naturally not show mercy. If he can find his specific location, Tony doesn't mind using violence to push this guy down. Unfortunately, things went against his wishes. Jarvis couldn't find his location, which made Tony's plan to go straight to Huanglan completely aborted. "Okay, since we can't find it, forget it. But pay close attention to the movements on the internet. This guy made such a big scene, it's impossible that he just wants to deal with me. If there is any movement, notify me as soon as possible." "Okay, sir," Jarvis responded, and Tony turned to look at Loki and smiled. "I'll trouble you to take care of the villa during this period. Don't let anyone blow it up." "Don't worry, I understand." Loki nodded, and Tony didn't stay any longer. He turned around and left the villa, got on the silver supercar, drove away from the villa, and headed towards Manhattan Shield. He wanted to see Reed, and by the way, unlock the rewards that should be unlocked. Reed was a patient before and ran out of the hospital to escape. After a big battle, his injuries became more and more serious, and he had to rest for a while. In the past month, Tony has not disturbed him. Now an inexplicable enemy has appeared. Although he is not afraid, Tony will not refuse to add a little more strength. Chapter 100. A man's romance is a fist to flesh fight. Mariah Hospital. Tony stepped into it again after a month, holding a bunch of tulips in his hand, and he went directly to the intensive care unit on the 3rd floor. As the door was pushed open, Reed subconsciously turned his head to look at the door in the ward. After seeing Tony, Reed, who was lying on the bed, quickly got up. A smile appeared on his face and said, "Boss, why are you here?" "Come to see you. I brought you tulips. I hope you like them." Tony smiled, and Reed looked at the tulips in his hand. A bitter smile appeared on his face. "Boss, I don't like tulips now." "Why?" Tony was a little surprised. Reed said helplessly, "The last time Victor came to see me, he also brought tulips. I have a shadow on this flower now." Hearing this, Tony couldn't help but joked, "Don't worry, I'm not here to kill you. How are you? How are you recuperating?" The doctor said there's nothing serious. "I feel very good and can be discharged at any time." "There's no rush to be discharged. You can rest in the hospital for a while. Just treat it as a vacation." "Okay, since you, boss, are you in no hurry? I'll rest for a few more days." The two chatted for a while, and the atmosphere in the room seemed very relaxed. "By the way, boss, what are you doing here today?" Reed asked curiously. "Nothing. First of all, I came to visit you and see how your body is recovering. And secondly, what do you think about my invitation to you to join the Alliance before? Didn't I agree to join?" Reed asked back in confusion. "Oh, really? That might be my mistake." Tony laughed casually, but the smile on the corner of his mouth kept rising at this moment. "Ding, successfully recruited new members, Mr. Fantastic. Reed, rewards have been issued. Please check for yourself." After receiving the system's prompt, Tony's goal was accomplished. He chatted with Reed for a few more words, and then Tony stood up and said goodbye. Leaving the hospital and returning to the car, Tony rubbed his hands excitedly, his eyes full of anticipation. "System, draw a lottery," Tony muttered in his heart, and suddenly, a turntable appeared in front of him. Looking at the long-lost lottery roulette, Tony felt a sense of familiarity. At this moment, he once again found the feeling of the first lottery, excitement, and excitement. Soon, the pointer on the roulette wheel spun quickly, and soon after images appeared in front of Tony's eyes. When it felt about right, Tony ordered to stop. Suddenly, the speed of the pointer continued to slow down, and finally stopped on a square. Moo. A dog cow mooing sounded, and a yellow cow appeared on the roulette wheel and hit Tony's head. When the two touched, the yellow ox turned into a light spot and merged into Tony's body, and Tony's body also changed at this moment. A dull thump echoed in the car, and his heart beat more vigorously. The blood that was originally flowing slowly was now driven by the heart, flowing rapidly like a rushing river. As the blood flowed through his body, the light spots continued to merge into the bone marrow, bones, tendons, flesh, and blood, making his body more solid, and the density of the bones greatly increased. 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, after staying in the car for half an hour, the transformation of the body by the ox spell was completely completed. Tony opened his eyes and clenched his fists instantly, and a low sonic boom sounded directly in the car. For a moment, even Tony himself was stunned. He didn't use any force, just a simple movement of his hands, and the air produced a sonic boom. "How much power do you have now?" Looking at his hands in surprise, Tony laughed silently again. Up to now, he has obtained quite a few spells, but the one that really changed him was the bull spell. In the past, when he fought with others, he always used long-range attacks, positioning himself as a mage. But from today on, he has officially changed his job to a warrior. After all, a man's romance is to fight with fists. While thinking, Tony opened the system panel to check the latest information. Name, Tony Stark. Gender, male. Identity, heir of the Shadow Kingdom. Abilities, horse spell, dragon spell, sheep spell, rabbit spell, pig spell, bull spell, control of Shadow Ninja, control of Shadow Blade, control of Shadow Knight Bat, control of Shadow Troll, control of Shadow Warrior, control of Shadow Alien. Number of draws: 0. Members of the Dark Alliance, Spider-Man, Winter Soldier, Green Goblin, Dr. Octopus, Mr. Fantastic. Looking at the luxurious panel data, Tony's eyes finally fell on the newly appeared Shadow Alien group. If we talk about which group in the Shadow Corps is the most impressive, it is undoubtedly the Shadow Ninja. But if we talk about which army is the most terrifying, it must be the Black Shadow Alien. They are different from other Black Shadow army groups. They have no hands and feet, only tentacles. Whether they move or attack, they keep twisting their bodies like snakes. Humans are naturally resistant to mollusks and multi-legged animals, not to mention creatures like Black Shadow aliens. In particular, the Black Shadow alien in the original book had its black robe taken off, revealing its hideous face, which was simply a childhood shadow. However, now they are all his most loyal subordinates, and fear does not exist. If it were not for the fact that there are so many people now, Tony would have wanted to summon a Black Shadow alien directly to show his face. And just when Tony was improving his strength, at this moment, in the manor where the Eagle Countryman was, a group of fully armed strong men were guarding various parts of the manor. In the room, the Eagle Countryman had been tortured to the point of being unrecognizable. If you could not see his chest constantly rising and falling, you would have thought it was a corpse. At this time, a strong man came over holding a screen and squatted in front of the Eagle Countryman. The screen was dark, but at this moment, a voice came out of the screen. "You are so brave that you dare to impersonate me. It has been a long time since anyone dared to provoke me like this." The voice on the screen was hoarse and casual, and there was not much emotion in it. However, the Eagle Countryman who was tortured was on the verge of collapse, so after hearing this, he knelt on the ground and kowtowed continuously, saying, "I'm sorry, sir. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to do it. I didn't know it was you who was impersonating me. Someone paid me to do this." "Really?" The hoarse voice continued to sound on the screen. "Then contact him now. I want to see who has such courage." After the words fell, the Eagle Countryman's expression changed, and he said in fear, "Sir, I can't contact him." "Really?" "Yes, sir. Every word I said is true. I really can't contact him." "Well, in this case, then you have no value in living. Kill you," the voice on the screen said casually, and the words were full of indifference to life. When the Eagle Countryman heard this, his expression changed drastically, and before he could say anything, a strong man holding a dagger slashed his neck directly. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.